News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here. It's 3 p.m. It's GB News. And Rishi Sunak has inadvertently, apparently, made the asylum seeker backlog worse. I will tell you why and exactly how much more money it's costing you than planned. We're also going to be talking about this story as well. Meghan Markle has been dumped. No, not by Prince Harry, but by Spotify. Who'd have thought it, hey? After she treated us to such gems about, yeah, no, me neither. On a serious note, we're also going to be talking about this as well. Boris Johnson. The Tory party are being urged to move on from Boris, but what I want to know is, can you? Can Conservative voters? Can people who voted for him at the last election? And finally, another shocking soft-touch law and order story. Serial killer, depraved monster Levi Belfield has been granted permission to get married in prison. What on earth are we playing at? Yesterday, Colin Pitchfork was set for release, and now this guy's going to be able to get married. It absolutely beggars belief. We're going to get stuck right into the lot of it here with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Oh, we've also got Just Stop Oil. There's even more for you to love. Yes, that's right. These Just Stop Oil numpties have been back at it again at the Opera. So there we go. Anyway, right, so I will take you over now to get your headlines.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3, your top stories from the GB newsroom. And we start with some breaking news. A 48-year-old man has been arrested after a police officer was stabbed in Maidstone yesterday evening. Kent Police says he's in a serious but stable condition. A man has been arrested after a police officer was stabbed in Kent, and we'll bring you more on that developing story as we get it. Detectives have been given until the early hours of tomorrow morning to question the 31-year-old suspect in the Nottingham knife attacks. It's being widely reported he's a former student of the university, Valdo Calocane. Last night, family members of the victims gave powerful tributes to their loved ones at an emotional vigil. Thousands lined the city centre to pay their respects to Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates. Grace's brother James said she was so much more than just a sister.
Grace wasn't only just a sister to me, she was a best friend of mine, my mother, my father, all her friends, and all her family. And if there's only one message that comes out of this, I urge you all to cherish every moment you spend with your loved ones, as you just never know when it will end.
I think its findings are damning, and they really indicate that Boris Johnson was a lawbreaker, but also that he was a liar, that he misled Parliament. Now it's down to Rishi Sunak to actually show some backbone. You know, he's not shown backbone on this so far. The taxpayers picked up Boris Johnson's legal bill. Rishi Sunak has shown himself to be unwilling to stand up to egos in his party until now. We've got so much psychodrama still in the Conservative Party when it should be focused on delivering the people's priorities.
Shadow Women and Equality Secretary Annalise Dodds speaking there. The Daily Mail has confirmed that Boris Johnson will be its new columnist. The former PM has promised to offer uncensored views. His first piece will be out tomorrow. The former Director General of the police watchdog has been charged with raping a girl under 16. Michael Lockwood is accused of 6 counts of indecent assault and 3 counts of rape against the teenager. The Crown Prosecution Service says the 64-year-old allegedly committed the crimes during the 1980s. He left the Independent Office for Police Conduct in December after it emerged he was being investigated over a historical allegation. By mutual agreement, Spotify has ended its lucrative deal with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Meghan Markle hosted just one podcast series as part of the deal called Archetypes, which ran for 12 episodes. The couple signed the deal with the streaming giant, estimated to be worth around £18 million in late 2020. In a joint statement, the two parties said they were proud of the series they'd made together. A hosepipe and sprinkler ban is to be introduced in Kent and Sussex from the 26th of June as the heat wave continues. South East Water says it's bringing in the ban amid shortages in the 2 counties where drinking water has reached record demand this month. Some households in Kent and Sussex have been without water since Monday due to supply issues. Rule breakers could find themselves hit with a £1,000 fine. Conservative MP Nisgani told us there was no option but to impose the ban.
I know everyone doesn't want a hosepipe ban. I wanted it. It's here. It's a really good result. It means that people can have up to 10% more water in their systems at home. But look, really, South East Water need to get their act together. We've had a couple of days of sunshine and people have now not had water for up to 5 days. And people don't even know when it's going to be back.
And back to Boris Johnson and some breaking news. Boris Johnson committed a clear breach of the rules by only informing the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments of becoming a columnist at the Daily Mail half an hour before the public announcement. That's according to the watchdog, and we'll bring you more on that story, that breaking story, as we get it. And the fossilised remains of a previously unknown type of dinosaur have been found on the Isle of Wight. It's the first new species of armoured dinosaur to be found on the island since 1865 and belongs to the same plant-eating family, the Ankylosaurus. Named the Vectopelta barretti, it was discovered in rocks dating back between 66 and 145 million years. And we all love a dinosaur story. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back over to Patrick.
Strap yourselves in for the latest round of migration madness. It turns out that Rishi Sunak's plans to clear the asylum backlog is not only unachievable, but it's actually made things worse, and it's costing the taxpayer billions more than expected. In order to clear the backlog, Home Office layabout would have to process around 2,200 applications a week, but they're actually processing around half of that. Oh, and only 1/5 of Home Office staff tasked with clearing the backlog are fully trained and working independently. The mind boggles thinking about what catastrophic decisions that lot are making when one considers the fact that a bloke from Sudan facing a rape charge was allowed to stay forever. The cost of the asylum backlog, which is around 100,000 people, is staggering. The government overspent by £2.2 billion last year, mainly due to hotel accommodation. The Home Office spent around £3.6 billion on asylum support costs in 2022-23, nearly double the year before. Seriously, at this rate, we might as well just put all the asylum seekers on a giant ferry, bring them into Calais, and then on, of course, to Dover, rent out the Ritz and build an extension on it. I mean, I fail to understand how it's not more cost-effective to do a monumental recruitment drive and employ more people to process claims. But I'll tell you what's going to happen. I'll make a prediction. Sunak will get desperate just in time for the next election. And we'll just start waving all these people through to clear the backlog. The asylum seeker charities will all stand up and go, see, they were all genuine asylum seekers. And we'll end up with more crime, housing pressure and social unrest. So, to summarise, the backlog is getting worse, the costs are going up, nobody's happy, everything's knackered, and still, for some reason, we're not just putting people on planes or turning the boats back. Well, that's what I think. I want to hear from you. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. With me to kick things off, I'm very gratefully joined in the studio by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, the National Audit Office's statistics and findings here are actually quite shocking. It appears that, albeit inadvertently, things are not going particularly well for Rishi Sunak.
Well, indeed. So you tell the audience regularly to strap themselves in.
Strap yourself in.
For a high-octane ride. I would say strap yourselves in for a bit of a mental marathon. I'm going to check with you periodically to see whether you've nodded off on
OK,
this.
it is Friday.
But 173,000 is currently what the number of people waiting for an initial asylum decision is at. There is, within that figure, though, a historic backlog. It was at 100,000 people who've been waiting a long time, and we're talking years for that first decision on asylum. Rishi Sunak, in December of last year, said that he was going to reduce this historic backlog, and he has done to an extent. It's gone from 100,000 down to about 78,000. But do the maths, and the National Audit Office say that there is no way at the current rate of these Home Office asylum application processors, the job they're doing, they're processing them at about 1,100 a week. There's no way that you will get that historic backlog down to zero, basically. And of course, the added issue, the flip side of this is you get the historic backlog down at the cost of just generally doing the other asylum processing that you're supposed to do. And all of the time they're increasing. So 1,100... Are you still awake?
I am just, yes.
So 1,100 a week are being processed. Right, in the last 6 days, not even a week, we have had 1,800 people crossing the channel. And this is not a particularly good week. 2 days of really good weather. But the rest, it's been, you know, days of maybe 100, 150.
So in an average week, where the weather is relatively passable, we are still accepting more people in than we are processing.
Yes. 1,800 coming in, and 99% of them will go on to claim asylum. But that, you know, that doesn't account for everyone who's claiming asylum, because those coming in, thousands a year on the backs of lorries that are being caught, are also claiming asylum. Those who are overstaying a visa and working illegally in the economy and being caught, many of them go on to claim asylum. People land on a flight and claim asylum. So there's lots of other avenues where people are coming in, and that asylum backlog continues to grow. The historic asylum backlog is there, and getting that down eventually may be a goal. But at the same time, you're taking your eye off the ball with the overall number of people in the asylum system.
And if we overspent by £2.2 billion in the year just gone, can you explain to me why that money can't be spent employing enough Home Office staff to process these people? It has to be cheaper to do that than to continually try to find however many rooms it is every single day for these people. All of it. It's got to be cheaper to just employ more staff.
There is a recruitment process underway by the Home Office to increase the staff level. Because they cut it by half.
Oh, lovely.
So that's one of the reasons why you've seen a big backlog. That, and because it just becomes so much more complicated, the process, than it was, say, a decade and a half ago, because those within the whole asylum system, from the people traffickers that are facilitating the passage of these people illegally across the channel, to the charities and the lawyers who are assisting them, they have become much more sophisticated in what they can tell these asylum seekers to help ensure that they are allowed to stay. For instance, the people traffickers telling them, throw away your documents. So even if you get a no at the end of the day, i.e. your asylum application is rejected, we still can't return you to Iran or Afghanistan or wherever because there's no documentation for you, and that particular dysfunctional government wouldn't have you back anyway.
Look, Mark, thank you. Cracking top of the show there. It's Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. So we've spoken about the facts and the numbers here. I think now it moves on to being a question of, well, what's the policy and what policies need to change? Especially in light of yesterday's story that I was covering about, it appears in this country, if you do arrive here even illegally and then you go on to commit a serious crime in this country, if you come from a country that is war-torn or has got civil unrest, we still can't deport you anyway. And at what point is Rishi Sunak going to have to get suitably desperate that he takes the kind of drastic action that I suspect a lot of people at home, a lot of people listening online or on their radios would now think we have to take in order to stop this migrant madness? I'm joined now by Alex Phillips, who's a policy advisor to Reform UK, a former MEP, my old mucker as well. Alex, good stuff. Look, what kind of policy decision does he have to take here? Because people will be banging their heads off desks around the country at the moment saying, look, Rishi, you've tried your best, but unless you get some flights taking off or start turning the boats back, it ain't happening, mate.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And actually, if you look at the legacy of countries that have chosen to take action, interceptive action, such as turning the boats back, it has been remarkably successful. So despite when Australia did this at the start of the century and the start of the 2020s, there being huge outcry from the usual suspects, Amnesty International, the UN, etc., what it did do was act as a final deterrent and basically seized up that passage, and the boats essentially just stopped coming. And I don't really understand the argument that somehow a boat going back in one direction across the channel is somehow riskier, especially when that boat would have been essentially escorted back to its proceeding on its passage in our direction. And actually, by not doing this, by not taking this drastic action, what the government are essentially doing are continuing to enable a very profitable and reckless business model of international human traffickers who see lives as cargo, essentially. And so in creating a once and final solution to this problem by saying, if you try and cross the channel, which isn't a huge waterway, it's not that difficult to police, not like, say, the Mediterranean, or even when you look at the waters surrounding Australia, what they would be doing once and for all is saying, this must end, this must be put to a stop, and would actually be saving countless lives.
Yeah, I'm sure it would in the round. And Rishi Sunak can say that he's been giving it a good go. But at what point do the problems get so insurmountable, really, when you look at the fact that we don't seem to be able to process enough people? My big concern, Alex, will be, as I raised earlier on, that we're going to get to a stage where Rishi goes, I promised to reduce this backlog, just wave everyone through so I look good. And that, I think, leaves us in an even bigger mess.
Well, one could argue that one of the reasons there is this backlog in the first place is because a vast number of the migrants coming to our shores are people who have tried to claim asylum already and have had their asylum applications rejected. In fact, the UK has an approval rate of around 70% compared to countries the other side of the Channel with an approval rate of about 5%. So people who have actually had their asylum applications rejected in up to 5 different European countries end up basically in Calais, going further west because it's the last stop saloon, essentially, in the UK, because it approves the vast majority of these cases, continues to be a draw factor. So we need to also look at case precedent. I think we also need to strengthen the qualifications for those claiming asylum, because the truth of the matter is, if we enable applications to be made on the basis of things such as poverty, on civil unrest in a country, on sexuality, we're essentially saying to 3/4 of the world, you would have a right to come and be resident here.
Absolutely.
And that's just unsustainable.
And we're also saying the other kicker to that is not only would you have the right, but it's also if you actively do wrong in this country, you actively engage in criminality, we also can't then send you back there, because that in itself would be evil, which is, I think, just completely bonkers. The other big kicker to this, which I haven't read the stats out on yet, but I will now, the Home Office has been asked to try to find around 500 accommodation spaces a week for new people. Now, can you imagine, Alex, if we put that amount of energy into people who are already homeless here, homeless veterans, young single mums who've fallen on hard times, you name it, all of these people, young people who are just remotely successful young people just out of university who can't get on the housing ladder. If we had the kind of energy that we've got for people who've just illegally entered this country to find housing for people who are already here, then actually we'd solve a lot of our problems, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, indeed we would. But I also think it's worth pointing out that in many respects, the small boats crisis works a treat for the government because it distracts everybody, with the government able to say, well, look, it's very difficult for us to deal with this situation. France aren't doing their job properly. We're doing all we can, but it's lefty lawyers. We would love to be stronger, but it's the UN, it's the EU, you name it, everyone but the government. And yet the migration they actually can control, the legal migration, is reaching record numbers. We're talking about basically 2/3 people net per year coming to legally live in the UK. To put that in context, in terms of spousal visas, we issued 13,000 visas for dependents of students to come and live here. We're talking about wives and children of people from abroad who want to come and study here. In 2021, that went up to 138,000. That is unsustainable. But while we're talking about the patently illegal migration coming into the UK, what we're doing actually is helping the government create a smokescreen for the legal migration that they are ushering through, putting a huge strain on our infrastructure and public services.
Yeah, do you think we're just living in a giant immigration Ponzi scheme?
I think you could call it that, yes. And I don't really understand the UK's weakness when it comes to this. It's as if we've constantly got this fear of looking like the bad guys on the international stage. And of course, when anyone says, well, you know, people want to come to the UK because they have cultural ties to the UK, because of course, most people around the world don't speak German, they don't speak Dutch, they don't speak Hungarian, but they'll all have a smattering of English. But that doesn't mean that we have to end up the repository for all migrants who want somewhere to go. And even though there's often an argument saying, well, we could take more, when you look at the figures of the number of people we took from Hong Kong, that we took from Ukraine, that we took from Afghanistan, Britain is doing its fair share above and beyond what many other countries are doing.
Absolutely, and also, it's what other people want us to take. It's like the Archbishop of Canterbury. He wants us to throw our arms around the world, sort out all of their problems in their own country, and then also allow all of them to come here as well. Alex, thank you very much. Always a pleasure and a delight. Alex Phillips there, who's a policy advisor to Reform UK and a former MEP. Look, more on this on our website. To summarise, the asylum seeker backlog looks like it's getting worse, not better, and it's costing us more, not less. So, good news. Happy Friday, everybody. But go to gbnews.com. It's the fastest-growing national news website in the country. It's got the best analysis and opinion, as well as, of course, all of the latest breaking news. Now, talking of breaking news, just quickly before I go to my next topic here, there is some big Boris news that I'm going to bring you in just a second. So hold on to your hats. Why can't people just let it go? Hasn't this guy been through enough? But anyway, I have got news of another setback for Harry and Meghan. Spotify has ditched their multi-million-pound podcast deal after just 12 episodes. But, I mean, how are we going to live without Meghan Markle's wisdom on... Yeah, right, sorry, yeah, I'll have to think about that. Anyway, I'll see you in a tick. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's News Channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Just had some news through of some big breaking news that I'm going to bring to you now with Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, and it relates to the alleged attacker in those Nottingham killings. Mark?
We have now had it confirmed from Nottinghamshire Police that the prime suspect in these killings, Valcosta Kalokan, has been charged with 3 counts of murder. The murder of Grace O'Malley Kumar, the murder of a fellow student, 19-year-old Barney Webber, and the murder of 65-year-old Ian Coates. Now, we're told that he will appear before Nottingham Magistrates Court for an initial court appearance tomorrow. We were reporting just an hour or so ago that Nottinghamshire Police had been given a further 12 hours to continue questioning this prime suspect until early tomorrow morning. Clearly, they didn't need that in the end. They have now decided to formally charge him with 3 counts of murder.
OK, and what do we know about this suspect at the moment? I mean, you very much led the way on this story on the day. What do we know about this individual as it stands?
Well, we know that he's a West African migrant, came to the UK more than 10 years ago, had settled in Nottingham. It was revealed yesterday, a former student at Nottingham University, of course, all the more resonant, given that 2 of those who were stabbed to death were students at Nottingham University. The university put out a statement saying they were shocked and saddened to learn of that news. However, the police have said that they don't think that the crimes are connected in any way to the fact that he was a former student at the university himself. What we still don't know at this stage, although we've got 3 counts of murder there, there's other potential charges because 3 people were knocked over, one of them very seriously injured. There's also the potential still for terrorism to be a factor. We had heard from Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, that counter-terrorism officers were still assisting with Nottinghamshire Police. Certainly as of yesterday afternoon, that they hadn't backed off yet because they hadn't fully established whether there was a terrorist motivation. Now, that might come out in the fullness of time, and of course, there will be that court appearance, which may give, although you're always restricted with the initial magistrates' court hearing on what you can report, but we might get an indication as to whether there's any kind of terrorist link that they found at all, or what the motivation might have been.
Or what the motivation was. I mean, this is the key thing, really, in the wake of all of this, isn't it? It is the why of it all. Look, Mark, thank you very much. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. Excuse me, that is the breaking news that in the last few moments, 31-year-old Valdo Kalakane has been charged with the murder of 3 people killed in Nottingham in that knife and van rampage. I have another little bit of breaking news to bring you now. Apparently, Boris Johnson committed a clear breach of the rules by only informing the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments of becoming a columnist at the Daily Mail half an hour before the public announcement. I mean, forgive me, but I strongly think that Boris Johnson might have stopped caring at this point, don't you? I'm joined by our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, who can give us the latest on this. So, Tom, Boris Johnson has broken some more rules that he yet again doesn't care about.
Well, Patrick, that would appear to be the case. ACOBA, as it's known, the Advisory Committee on Business and Business Appointments, is there to make sure that people who have recently left government, whether they be ministers or former civil servants, don't sort of have aren't using their experience in government in an improper way. It's mostly about sort of what boards people might sit on, but also people might remember that ACOBA is the body that was vetting Sue Gray's appointment to be able to go and work for the Labour Party after having worked for a series of Conservative governments as a civil servant for a long time. Questions over how long she should have as a cooling off period before being allowed to do that. This is the same body. However, I think there's an important piece of context here, which are that these ACOBA rules are not statute. They're advisory. And there's no sanctions for not complying with these rules.
Well, what's the
ACOBA
point,
doesn't have any means by which they can enforce these rules.
Well, we could argue, what's the point of all of this then, I suppose, really? I mean, how big is this a scandal, or is this just yet another example of people looking at something Boris Johnson's done and gone, that should be illegal?
I think what it is not a great look for the former Prime Minister, but it's nothing beyond that. There's no sanction that applies to this. There's no means of enforcing these rules. These aren't statutory rules. This is Boris Johnson just informing this body that he got his new job half an hour before it was publicly announced, rather than a few days. Clearly, the political opponents of Boris Johnson will big this up into some huge national scandal, but ultimately, I don't think this one's going to stick that far. There's no, as I say, sanction that goes along with it.
And just to clarify, Tom, quickly, this is the same body that think everything's A-OK with Sue Gray, is that right?
That's right. People were expecting ACOBA to try and delay Sue Gray's appointment to work for the Labour Party for perhaps a year. That's what they did when David Cameron appointed a former civil servant to the House of Lords in 2016. They made her wait a year, but they haven't done that, strangely, with Sue Gray working for the Labour Party. But yes, this is the same body. They look at former civil servants as well as former ministers and what they're allowed to do in their lives after leaving government.
Tom, thank you very much. Tom Harwood there, our Deputy Political Editor. Well, two big bits of breaking news just in that segment alone, that the individual believed to be the Nottingham knife attacker has now been charged with 3 counts of murder, and a very different one on this one, which is Boris Johnson apparently committed a clear breach of rules and regs by not informing the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments of becoming a columnist at the Daily Mail. If any more information drops on either of those two big breaking stories, I will have up to the second reports on it for you. But we will actually, as chance would have it, be talking a bit about Boris Johnson again before 4 o'clock, because as the dust settles over Partygate, I will ask, is it time for the Tories to move on and forget Boris? More importantly, can Tory voters and will Tory voters move on and forget Boris? The emails on this have already been fascinating. gbviews@gbnews.com. Get them coming in. But first, it's time for your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 3:32. Your top stories from the GB newsroom, and more on that breaking story that we've been hearing about. The suspect in the Nottingham knife attacks, Valdo Kalokane, has been charged with the murder of 3 people who were killed in the city on Tuesday: Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates. The 31-year-old is a former student of Nottingham University. He's also accused of 3 counts of attempted murder after 3 people were injured, one critically when they were hit by a van. He's due to appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. Boris Johnson has committed a clear breach of the rules by only informing the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments of becoming a columnist at the Daily Mail half an hour before the public announcement. According to the watchdog, the former PM has promised to offer uncensored views in his column. His first piece will be out tomorrow. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak faces a battle to hold his Tory party together after Boris Johnson was found to have lied to MPs over Partygate. A debate and vote on the Privileges Committee report published yesterday will take place in the Commons on Monday, with some Tory MPs uncertain about what to do. Mr Johnson, who's branded the report deranged, remains popular with many of his party members, and his most loyal supporters are expected to vote against it. Number 10 hasn't yet said if the Prime Minister will attend the vote. And the former Director General of the police watchdog has been charged with raping a girl under 16. Michael Lockwood is accused of 6 counts of indecent assault and 3 counts of rape against the teenager. The Crown Prosecution Service says the 64-year-old allegedly committed the crimes during the 1980s. He left the Independent Office for Police Conduct in December after it emerged he was being investigated over a historical allegation. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2816 and €1.1712 euros. The price of gold is £1,528.45 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,652 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, there's more bad news for Harry and Meghan today. Their £18 million deal with Spotify has been binned. After just 12 episodes, Meghan hosted one series where she interviewed celebrities about the history of stereotypes aimed at women, allegedly. She said at the time that she loved doing the podcast, but her hopes of doing more are now over. I'm joined by the culture and brand expert, Nick Eady. Nick, thank you very much for joining me. Now, also, Nick, I understand that you have a bit of a history with Meghan Markle, is that right?
Yes, we had a good friendship. I was the person who actually brought her over to the UK, so maybe it's all my fault.
Yeah.
But you know, she's a very engaging woman with a lot of ambition.
OK, all right. So, I mean, are you still friends?
No, we're not friends. I'm one of the many that were ghosted.
OK, all right. Well, we might return to that slightly if you're comfortable talking about it, but let's just deal with the actual story at hand first before we get involved with the personal stuff. So, Archetypes is no more. She did, of course, treat us to such pearls of wisdom. I'm sure you'll have some, but there was, you know, numerous ones with Serena Williams, wasn't there? There was one with Mariah Carey, where Mariah Carey called her a diva, which Meghan felt the need to then issue some kind of weird statement saying, oh, I'm not a diva, like a diva would do. Bad news for the couple.
Yes, it is bad news for them. I think for her especially, you know, she was somebody who was extremely passionate about doing this podcast. But, you know, what she did, unfortunately, was make it a very, very elitist, and so probably alienated a lot of her fans. And I think that's one of the big reasons why Spotify had probably thought about dropping her. Also, they wasn't particularly rating particularly well. And the other thing, too, is that her popularity since, you know, Harry has talked so openly about his family, has really, really diminished.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, is this the classic example of burning all of your bridges to make a quick buck and then realising that, frankly, you're not really worth the hype? And now what do you do?
Well, yeah, this is a problem and it's actually set up a massive precedent here, because the fact of the matter is that, you know, people are expecting them to be the golden couple and Meghan to be this golden person who will make money for brands. That's the only reason that they are throwing these millions at them, is because they want to make money in return. And what they realise now is actually the value is not there.
No, indeed. And can you just talk to me a little bit more about the numbers behind this, then? So it was supposedly an £18 million deal for 2 series. We're only being treated to one of them now. And so they presumably will have only been paid for the work that's been done. And what could this mean going forward? Because when it comes to brands, once one brand pulls out, others may be joined, don't they?
Well, yeah, this is the biggest problem, from a financial point of view. 18 million is a lot of money. And so when a brand has suddenly decided not to further the contract, then there's a huge issue there. And other brands are going to be really alarmed by this because Spotify is a massive player. They've said that they're finding it hard to find revenue from advertising, etc. And so if they think that this sort of golden goose that, Meghan Markle was really purporting herself to be, and when she left the royal family, that's why people were throwing so much money at her. Now, for people to say, actually, no, we want a refund, that is going to send out to all the different brands a huge message of actually no confidence.
But isn't it just because she didn't really have much of value to say? I could understand it if she was going to come out and say some absolute pearls of wisdom that proved her to be an academic genius who'd managed to enter some kind of higher echelon of human intellect and understanding and knowledge, like a Buddha. But instead, we just got her talking about how she was only seen as a black woman when she met Harry, and that she only realised that ambition could also be bad when she met Harry. I mean, there's a theme there to begin with. But was the fundamental bit of this was the product itself wasn't very good?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The product wasn't amazing. And that's actually what the issue is here, is that Meghan Markle, whatever we think of her, she was a B-list actress. She wasn't a Hollywood A-lister. She's never been a Hollywood A-lister in that respect. And why would I want to listen to something that she says when she hasn't really got the credentials behind her? She's not inspiring like Oprah Winfrey. She's not got those credentials of working, day in, day out to get to where she is. She doesn't have them. So I'm bored and I don't want to buy into it.
Yeah, and it is kind of the fakery of it all. When she was interviewing Serena Williams, I mean, that is a woman who has worked with blood, sweat and tears to achieve the pinnacle of sporting excellence for however many decades she's been basically at the top of the game. Someone who's really worked for that fame, for that money, for that success, who has something of value, actually, I would suggest, to learn from when it comes to that. Whereas, I mean, Meghan Markle was in Suits for a bit, married a prince, and then swanned off to America, didn't she? I mean, what are we learning from that?
Well, we're not learning anything. We're learning that if you marry a prince, maybe you can command millions from Spotify, but that's not going to last forever. And I think that's the only issue. I think the problem is, and it is, as you've just said, someone like Serena Williams has spent all their lives carving a fantastic career, being the top of their game. Meghan Markle has married into it and got this massive profile by, proxy.
So, in a nutshell, we're thinking that other brands may well follow suit. It does come as well after a string of pretty heavy losses. I mean, there was that non-high-speed car chase around New York, and there was the South Park episode, there was the reaction to Spare, there's just the general toxicity surrounding them. I mean, it is fascinating for me that they've kind of cancelled themselves. But, Nick, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind just... You have a much better insight into the mind and the inner workings of Meghan Markle than I could ever want to have, frankly. But what was it like for you? So you kind of brought her to the UK. I won't use the word inflicted, but you brought her to the UK, and then she canned you.
Well, in a nutshell, we were friends for quite a while. I found her, and I do think that she is very philanthropic. She really wants to change the world and use her platform for positivity, which. And you can't sort of criticise somebody for that. I think, though, that, from a day one, I understood there's a lot of ambition there. And when somebody needs you, they'll use you. When they don't need you, they'll just discard you, as many people have felt that as she's gone up and up and up.
Well, I will never discard you, Nick. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I would love to continue them at length going forward. So, Nick, thank you very much. Nick Eady there, who is, of course, the culture and brand expert guru, and we'll leave out the bit about him bringing Meghan Markle over and this whole mess being his fault. Not really, Nick, not really, but there we go. Now, the party might be over for Boris Johnson, but the Tory civil war is still raging. I'm less bothered about that. All of the news today in The Times, in The Sun, all the editorial was this: the Tories need to move on from Boris. Now, that's fine. The Tory party might need to move on from Boris. But can the electorate? Will the electorate? That's what I want to know. I want to know it from you. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
OK, let's crack on. So, in a few minutes' time, I will have news of Just Stop Oil's latest stunt. After targeting the snooker and the rugby, they've now gone after the opera. I mean, know your audience, guys. But at 4 o'clock, I've also got more bad news for Rishi Sunak, as he's warned that his plans to tackle the asylum backlog are actually, well, they're not just going to fail, they've actually made things worse, apparently, which is, you know, quite a bad day out for the lad. But a day after the Partygate report and Boris Johnson's devastating response, the question for me now is this. Is it time for the Conservative Party to move on from Boris? Can you move on from Boris? Do you think that Tory voters will move on? Rishi Sunak certainly thinks so, but the civil war triggered by Johnson is still raging. A poll has found that more than 3/4 of people think Johnson knowingly misled the Commons. But the man who delivered an 80-seat majority, then got Brexit done, remains a popular figure among a large number of Conservative voters. And I do think a follow-up question should seriously have been asked, which is, do you care? You may well think he was a liar, but do you actually care that much? Joining me now is former Tory Cabinet Minister Anne Widdecombe. Anne, thank you very much. Now, I woke up this morning and saw the editorials in The Times, in The Sun as well, which was all about the Tories have got to move on from Boris. You've got to let it go. Fine, but will the voters, Anne?
Well, I lived through something even worse, which was the fall of Thatcher, which took place in 1990. And, I mean, both the party in Parliament and the party in the country was massively divided, and with one section of each very, very angry indeed. You've no idea. I mean, you think this was bad. I was mopping up tears from all the men at the time because there was just such a strong feeling. And the view was at that time, this was 1990, the view was at that time that we wouldn't be able to move on from it until after a general election, which we were supposed to lose. Now, in fact, the opposite happened. We won that general election, we moved on, and the party in the country came. doubtless some very reluctantly and doubtless some leaving altogether, did eventually come with us. So if you say, can it happen? The answer is yes, it can, according to precedent. Will it happen? Well, you've got something very different now. You've got a very low calibre parliament, which you certainly didn't have then. And you've got voters who, frankly, have just given up with the Tory party. So it's a different situation altogether.
And this is why I think it might almost be quite terminal, because, as you've said, the quality of politician is appalling at the moment. And also the Conservative Party appears to have veered away from its core message, which is that there's something worth conserving about Britain when you look at the immigration figures and the illegal immigration figures. So it's not as if there's some kind of barnstorming bloke coming up and taking Boris's place. I'm just going to put an email to you here, Anne, if that's all right. It's from Joan. She says, I'd vote for Boris again in a heartbeat for all his faults. I trust him above any of the others. And a lot of people in the Westminster bubble media, and a lot of people, who live in the Westminster bubble, I don't think can understand that idea about Boris, which is that fundamentally so many people do not care about his flaws. They like the guy and they'd vote for him again.
Yes, and that is what the Parliamentary Party doesn't understand. What they don't understand is that they jettisoned Boris, they jettisoned Liz Truss. Both were choices of the party and the country, and they've imposed their own choice, Rishi Sunak, who was rejected by the party and the country. So they've actually built in an enormous divide between the Parliamentary Party and the party and the country, and they don't even seem aware of it. And the other additional factor is that, of course, I made a comparison with the fall of Thatcher. She endorsed John Major. Boris hasn't endorsed Rishi.
He's not endorsed Rishi, and in fact, he's going to have a platform at least once a week to kick the living daylights out of him in the black and white print of the Daily Mail, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's a very, very talented writer, and he'll do just that. Remember this, he's got nothing to lose. They've kicked somebody outside the tent who will now do the proverbial in, who has nothing to lose. I mean, politically, never mind personally, never mind the party and the country, never mind any of those considerations. Politically, it is a stupid thing to do.
Now, what next for Boris, I suppose, Anne, is the big question. Do you think that he will return at some point? I mean, at the end of the day, the Conservative Party does want power, and if they do lose at the next election, they might quite fancy getting that power back.
I think when, I don't even think it's if anymore, I think when the party loses the next election, there will then be a battle royale for its heart and soul. And there will be a big battle between the two completely different wings of the party. And what I predict is that there could very easily be a split. Now, that's been predicted before and it hasn't happened, but I think the combination of circumstances in now mean that very probably it will be split. And a large part of that split will back Boris.
OK, Anne, and I do want to, add a little bit of uncharacteristic balance to proceedings, by the way, and just read an email out from Dennis, who does say, as a Tory member, I do say good riddance to the flawed personality. That's absolutely fine, Dennis. Of course, that is your view. I would quite like a follow-up email as to whether or not you still intend to vote for Rishi Sunak. Is that, a bit of a poor choice to succeed in? But, Anne, when I look at this now and I think about the MPs who owed Boris Johnson their current jobs, of which I think there are many. When you look at the fact that at the last election, most people, this is my view, most people voted Conservative for Boris Johnson and not necessarily for the Conservative Party. And then he's been ousted by people who potentially had a little bit of skin in the game, to say the least. And then MPs who now want to come out to bat for him are potentially going to be kicked out by the Conservative Party. It does look a little bit China/North Korea, does it not, in terms of being undemocratic?
It looks chaotic. I mean, China/North Korea is at least organised. It's an organised dictatorship. I mean, this is just a completely chaos. And I mean, on the one hand, for the House of Commons committee to say that if anybody called it a kangaroo court, they could be proceeded against. I mean, the dictatorship of that. And then the party saying, well, you've got to support us, you can't support Boris. I think everybody needs to calm down and take a deep breath, but I really wish we had a heavyweight leader, and given that we haven't, what he should be doing is to take a really seriously heavyweight advisor, preferably from among the very senior ranks of the Lords.
And thank you very much. It's always a real pleasure to chat to you. Anne Widdecombe there, former Tory Cabinet Minister, friend of the show, friend of the channel. The emails that are coming in are interesting. It's fair to say the vast majority of you getting in touch are saying, like Diana, I can't see that I would ever vote Conservative under Rishi Sunak. I will never get over this backstabbing. And that is the vast majority of the emails that are coming in. Well, let's be honest, what does that mean in the next general election then? If the Conservative vote is split, then, yeah, we can all play the tape forward, can't we, and see what's happening there. Loads of them coming in. Now, yesterday, I brought you a little clip of a Just Stop Oil protester who was crying after being arrested, and it brought a tear to many people's eyes. But just a few hours later, some of her mates were trying to ruin a night out for around 1,000 people. They went and set off a confetti bomb and blew an air horn during a performance of, and this is where I show how lacking in culture I am, the Glyndebourne Opera Festival in East Sussex. Nailed it. Check this out.
Yeah, we just got an air horn and a pizza at the Glyndebourne Opera.
I've just done it. You're not allowed to do that.
And you're not police, so please give it back. That's evidence.
Is it? Evidence of what?
Evidence if we're going to get arrested. I need this.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
OK. So, I mean, whoever is advising Just Stop Oil has got it catastrophically wrong. Whenever I interview them, they always seem to be white, upper-middle-class individuals with not a lot on, and then they go to events like the Chelsea Flower Show, which is, you know, it's full of pretty mild-mannered people, and then you've got some people there, of course, at an opera who, again, I would imagine are, you know, kind of mild-mannered culture vultures, and they just annoy them. And then they go, I'll tell you who else we can do. We'll have a go at the working class, won't we? We'll stop them getting to work. I mean, isn't it in reverse what they're doing there? And I am convinced, I am utterly, utterly convinced that they have bought into some kind of weird doomsday cult that is, it's all, I wouldn't be surprised if you cut the heads open of Just Stop Oil and you found kind of weird little microchips in there where someone had programmed them to believe that the world was going to end any minute now and that they had to cause as much disruption as possible. But tactics like this don't achieve their goal. Not a single person at that opera will have gone home and thought, I'm going to write to my local MP and get them to just stop oil. Anyway, gbviews@gbnews.com. Get your views coming in. Where do those self-entitled little twerps really get off? But, yes, I've got loads more coming your way in the next hour of this show. A reminder of the news that we brought you a little bit earlier on. It was the breaking news, which is that police have charged a man with 3 counts of murder following those devastating attacks in Nottingham on Tuesday. More information on that as we get it. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, we're going to read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Now, it turns out that Rishi Sunak's plans to reduce the asylum seeker backlog have made it worse and are set to cost us more money, apparently. So strap yourselves in for the shocking stats on that. In other news as well, Meghan Markle has been dumped. No, not by Prince Harry, by Spotify, in a move that could cost the couple tens of millions of dollars and potentially see other backers running out of the door as well. I will be dissecting what their future holds very, very shortly. Boris Johnson, the Tory party are being urged to just move on. Now, that's fine, but will you? Will the voter? Loads of emails coming in this so far, and it makes for fascinating reading, so keep them coming. But I tell you what, this will wind you right up. Levi Belfield, yep, the depraved, deranged serial killer, he has been granted the ability to get married in prison. Loads of questions, like who would want to marry that nutter, but also, why are we giving any perks to people who are just some of the most vile scum that we've ever produced? Anyway, Patrick Christys on GB News. I will also, of course, be bringing you the up-to-date breaking news on the Nottingham attacks, as the alleged attacker has now been charged with 3 counts of murder and named. So more information on that coming your way very, very shortly. But get your emails coming in on anything else that we've been talking about, gbviews@gbnews.com. Whether or not you're going to move on from Boris Johnson, that's been the big one so far. And, of course, your heartfelt reaction to Meghan Markle being dumped by Spotify. Now, though, it's your headlines with Rory.
Cheers, Patrick. Well, as you've been hearing, the suspect in the Nottingham knife attacks, Valdo Calocane, has been charged with the murder of the 3 people who were killed in the city on Tuesday. The victims were students Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and 65-year-old Ian Coates. The 31-year-old is a former student of Nottingham University. Calocane is also accused of 3 counts of attempted murder after 3 people were injured, one critically, when they were hit by a van on that morning. He's due to appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. The Advisory Committee on Business Appointments is accusing Boris Johnson of committing a clear breach of the rules. Well, according to the watchdog, the former Prime Minister informed them of his new role as a columnist at the Daily Mail a half hour before the public announcement was made. His first piece in the newspaper will be out tomorrow. He's promised to offer uncensored views. Rishi Sunak faces a battle to hold his Tory party together after Boris Johnson was found to have lied to MPs over Partygate. A debate and vote on the Privileges Committee report, published yesterday, will take place in the Commons on Monday, with some Tory MPs uncertain about what to do. Mr Johnson, who's branded the report deranged, remains popular with many of his party members, and his most loyal supporters are expected to vote against it. Well, Number 10 hasn't yet said if the Prime Minister will attend that vote, but Shadow Women's and Equality Secretary Annalise Dodds says the Prime Minister needs to stand up to Mr Johnson.
I think its findings are damning, and they really indicate that Boris Johnson was a lawbreaker, but also that he was a liar, that he misled Parliament. Now it's down to Rishi Sunak to actually show some backbone. He's not shown backbone on this so far. The taxpayers picked up Boris Johnson's legal bill. Rishi Sunak has shown himself to be unwilling to stand up to egos in his party until now. We've got so much psychodrama still in the Conservative Party when it should be focused on delivering the people's priorities.
A 48-year-old man has been arrested after a police officer was stabbed in Maidstone yesterday evening. Kent Police say he's in a serious but stable condition. We'll keep you updated on that story as we get more details. The former Director General of the Police Watchdog has been charged with raping a girl under 16. Michael Lockwood is accused of 6 counts of indecent assault and 3 counts of rape against the teenager. The Crown Prosecution Service says the 64-year-old allegedly committed the crimes during the 1980s. He left the Independent Office for Police Conduct in December after it emerged he was being investigated over a historical allegation. By mutual agreement, Spotify has ended its lucrative deal with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Meghan Markle hosted just one podcast series as part of the deal. It was called Archetypes, which ran for 12 episodes. The couple signed the deal with the streaming giant, estimated to be worth around 18 million quid in late 2020. Well, in a joint statement, the two parties said they were proud of the series they made together. A hose pipe and sprinkler ban is to be introduced in Kent and Sussex from the 26th of June as the heatwave across the country continues. South East Water says it's bringing in the ban amid shortages in the 2 counties, where drinking water has reached record demand this month. Some households in Kent and Sussex have been without water since Monday due to supply issues. Rule breakers could find themselves hit with a £1,000 fine. While Conservative MP Naz Ghani told us there was no option but to impose that ban.
I know everyone doesn't want a hosepipe ban. I wanted it. It's here. It's a really good result. It means that people can have up to 10% more water in their systems at home. But look, really, South East Water need to get their act together. We've had a couple of days of sunshine and people have now not had water for up to 5 days. And people don't even know when it's going to be back.
The fossilized remains of a previously unknown type of dinosaur have been found on the Isle of Wight. It's the first new species of the armoured dinosaur to be found on the island since 1865 and belongs to the same plant-eating family. It was discovered in rocks dating back between 66 and 145 million years. It's GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. Back to Patrick.
Meghan Markle's Spotify podcast is in the toilet. Spotify have flushed it after just one series. They say it's a mutual decision. Yeah, all right, like me and my ex mutually decided that I was too much of a nightmare, or when that modelling company and I came to the mutual decision that my face didn't quite fit. For the life of me, I cannot understand why Spotify, which offered around 18 million quid to Markle for her prolific spoken word, have pulled out of the deal. Sorry, mutually decided to part company. Mutually decided to part company. She treated us to such wisdom and insight as how she was never treated as a black woman until she met Harry, or how she didn't realise that being ambitious could be viewed negatively until she met Harry. There's a theme here, isn't there? Poor Harry. My favourite bit was when Mariah Carey called her a diva, and she absolutely hated it. Meghan felt compelled to release this statement. I won't put an accent on. We're like, no. It was all going swimmingly. I mean, really well, until the moment happened, which, I don't know about you, but it stopped me in my tracks. When she called me a diva. You couldn't see me, obviously, but I started to sweat a little bit. I started to squirm in my chair in quiet revolt, like, wait, no, what? How? But how could you? That's not true. That's not. Why would you say that? Well, she's saying that, Meghan, because you're a massive diva. The old, what Meghan wants, Meghan gets. I don't like the way that my cathedral smells, the non-stop drama, Meghan. That's why she's calling you a diva. Maybe, just maybe, your ambition was viewed negatively because people think it looks a lot like you married a prince to climb a social ladder, invited a load of celebs you've never met to your taxpayer-funded wedding, made the royal family miserable, moved to California and slagged everyone off, and then tried to make a quick buck, which has now, unsurprisingly, dried up. She bangs on about people seeing her as a black woman and judging her on her race. Well, the unfortunate truth, I think, for Meghan is that they don't do that. They actually judge her on the quality of her character. And people, including billion-dollar brands, don't like what they find below the surface. Well, that's what I think. I want to hear from you. GBviews at gbnews.com. I will be returning to that story a little bit later on in the show. But we are going, of course, to the much more serious news at hand, which is that in the last hour, police have charged 31-year-old Valdo Kalakane with the murders of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates in Nottingham. He has also been charged with 3 counts of attempted murder and will appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. Let's get more on this now with GB News' national reporter, Ellie Costello, who is in Nottingham for us. Ellie, thank you. What's the latest where you are?
Good afternoon to you, Patrick, and I must apologise. I am fighting with a sound speaker at the moment. There are scenes of grief and an outpouring of love behind me on my left, and you juxtapose that with normal life continuing in Old Market Square in Nottingham with a live band and a beer festival, it looks like. So I must apologise for that. But this is a significant development in the past hour or so. After 3.5 days in custody, police have now charged a man with 3 counts of murder following that deadly van and knife attack in Nottingham in the early hours of Tuesday morning. We know his name is Valdo Kalakane. He's aged 31, of no fixed address, and he's also charged with 3 counts of attempted murder. Now, those charges, of course, relate to the University of Nottingham students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, who are both aged 19. They were fatally stabbed in Ilkeston Road in the city just after 4 a.m. on Tuesday morning, and of Ian Robert Coates, aged 65, who was later found fatally stabbed in Magdala Road. Those further 3 charges of attempted murder, they relate to 3 members of the public who were struck by a van. There has also been a statement from Nottinghamshire Police, Patrick, in the past hour or so that says that these charges are a significant development and arise as a result of an investigation into these horrific incidents in our city. Our thoughts remain with the families and friends of all of those affected by these attacks, and we continue to provide support and reassurance. They have asked that people respect the family's privacy and allow them to grieve, and they've also asked the public not to speculate, as this is now a live legal case, and they have made that point in their statement. They say they are aware of the deep emotion being felt around this case, and they know there is a deep interest not just in Nottingham but all around the country. And Patrick, I did just want to leave you with these scenes behind us here in Old Market Square in Nottingham. You can see the city coming together. You would think the events of Tuesday morning would tear them apart, but no. Instead, we see this sign of unity, this sign of togetherness and this sign of love with all of these hundreds of bouquets, balloons, flowers. Just the most beautiful tribute to the 3 people that were killed here in the early hours of Tuesday morning. We're expecting the man being held on suspicion of murder and also of attempted murder to appear in court at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow.
Ellie, thank you very much. Ellie Costello, there, GB News' national reporter, who's in Nottingham for us as we react to that big breaking news. That, of course, the individual alleged to have been responsible for that knife and van rampage in Nottingham has now been charged with 3 counts of murder for Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates in Nottingham, and also charged with 3 counts of attempted murder. And he will appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. So there we go. But now, back to news about another, unfortunately, major setback to Rishi Sunak's plans to tackle the migrant crisis. Now, a major report says that efforts to clear the asylum backlog aren't working. And in fact, it goes further than that. It says that attempts have been made to make the situation even worse. Well, viewers on GB News can see pictures of more migrants arriving in Dover this morning. The National Audit Office says that by focusing on people who have been waiting for a decision for a long time, i.e. the backlog, it has inadvertently led to a bigger backlog of newer claims. And also, it's costing us rather a lot of money. GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White, is going to act as a statsman for you now. So, Mark, this is quite a damning report, which, as you will elaborate on, in a nutshell, shows that the problem is getting worse, not better, and is costing us billions more than expected.
Yeah, 173,000 people are currently in the asylum system having put forward asylum claims and are being processed. There is a historic backlog of 100,000 people who've been waiting for years for that initial decision. Now, Rishi Sunak in December of last year announced that he was going to get rid of that backlog by the end of this year. Well, he's reduced it a bit from 100,000 to 78,000. But the National Audit Office, who are very good at doing the maths, say if you do the maths, they're processing them at a rate of 1,100 a week. There's no way that by the end of the year you will have got rid of the remaining 78,000. And of course, the flip side of concentrating on the backlog means that actually all of the new asylum applications are not being processed at all. And you were showing the pictures there. Yes, our Kent producer has told us that today again, 325 so far have come across the English Channel on small boats. Now that calculated with the other arrivals this week over a 6-day period shows 1,800 people who have come across the Channel in the space of 6 days. So not even a week. Compare that to 1,100 being processed, and then you've got 1,800. And this is, you know, it's not the weeks that we're going to see when we get flat cam conditions for most, if not all, of the week. This is a week in which there are only a couple of days of really good weather, and the rest it's been blowing a bit.
No, exactly. And the cost itself, as you were alluding to there, we overspent by £2.2 billion last year. The Home Office also set itself a target of finding something along the lines of 500 new rooms for these people every single week, which is proving impossible. I did allude to earlier on it would be nice maybe if we set ourselves that target for people who are already homeless in this country, but that's a different point. But it's the cost of it as much as the actual practicalities of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, the cost and the practicalities. You know, they say they want to reduce the number of hotels, the reliance on hotels right across the country. There's barely a town and city across the country that doesn't have migrants, Channel migrants, asylum seekers in one of their local hotels. And there's an ominous indication of what we can look forward to in the months ahead, and that is by taking a look at what's happening in the Mediterranean. We've got another tragedy that's unfolded in the last couple of days in the Mediterranean, a fishing boat overloaded that's capsized with 70 odd that have drowned, hundreds more missing. Well, in Greece, in Spain, in Italy, those countries are reporting record numbers of people who have crossed the Mediterranean in these boats. And where do they go? Well, they head up, most of them, to Northern Europe, to the more affluent countries, and many will cross to France with a view to trying to get to the UK.
Well, exactly, and I'm not surprised that perhaps efforts to stop them crossing the Med are not necessarily what they once were, because if they can be crystal clear in the idea that these people are just going to travel through their country with a view to coming here, because by the sounds of it, we'll just let anyone in, then why would you really bother wasting all of your resources and money and effort trying to stop them in the first place? But Mark, thank you very much. Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor. Joining me to just further this discussion a little bit more is political commentator and media officer at the IEA. It's Reem Ibrahim. Reem, thank you very much. Rishi Sunak, to me, is behaving like a man who cannot be bothered to try to win the next general election. We had the whole Boris Johnson hoo-ha yesterday. The one way he would get a load of pro-Boris people back on side is if he stopped the boats. And actually, you hate to see it, Rishi, but the problem's getting worse, not better.
The problem is absolutely getting worse, and the amount of money it's costing the taxpayer is increasing significantly. We've heard now from this report that actually it's costing the Home Office about £3.6 billion in order to actually fund all of these asylum backlogs. And we've obviously heard from July last year that the backlog was about 100,000. Now we're being told that it's sort of increased to about 173,000. It does feel as though this kind of failure with the Home Office is really down to the fact that Sunak has sort of attempted to implement these very short-term targets rather than trying to achieve that long-term policy where it comes to actually reducing the number of asylum seekers that come to this country.
Now, Reem, you work at the Institute of Economic Affairs. You mentioned tax there. Now, when people get their pay slips up and down the country now, they will find, more often than not, that more tax than they've ever paid in their lives is going out. And then they look around and they see our public services and they think, well, I can't get a GP's appointment. Everyone's on strike everywhere as well. Our trains are knackered. And a lot of this money appears to be going to put up asylum seekers in four-star hotels. And it does make one wonder, Reem, why pay a tax?
No, you're absolutely right, Patrick. I mean, at the moment, we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years. We are not building enough homes, which means that young people are unable to afford their own homes, so they're not unable to get on the property ladder. We have public services that cost too much and deliver far too little. And at the moment, we're not seeing any sort of chance that this government is going to change any of this particular issue. And of course, this adds political pressure, right? When you've got 173,000 people now taking taxpayer money because they're on this asylum backlog, the Home Office unable to sort of manoeuvre that and actually make any kind of significant change. Of course, people will be upset. We're effectively paying our taxpayer money for this money to go into failing public services, but also for these individuals who aren't working to be able to take that money.
Look, Reem, thank you very, very much. It's Reem Ibrahim there, who is political commentator and media officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs. And I do think that that is an important point to kind of leave this discussion on for the moment, actually, because it is a question of bang for your buck, isn't it, when it comes to your tax? If you are in the middle of a cost of living crisis and you are struggling at the moment and you are seeing that taxes are going up, if you're trying to get on the housing ladder, if you are on the housing ladder and what's going on with your mortgage rates at the moment, and you just look around and you think, well, I'm skint, I'm being asked to pay more and more and more in tax from a group of people who maybe don't actually understand how little, you know, money people already have at the moment, I think you think, well, we're spending £2.2 billion a year more than we'd anticipated spending on people who are coming here illegally and taking the mick. Well, I'd rather not, frankly. GBviews at gbnews.com. Get your views coming in, but more on this story on our website. And get this as well at gbnews.com. It is the fastest growing national news website. It's got the best analysis, the best opinion, as well as all of the latest up-to-the-second breaking news. But, yes, I have got some more news of another setback for Harry and Meghan. You heard me prattling on about this at the start. Well, I'm going to get stuck in again shortly because Spotify has ditched their multi-million-pound podcast deal after just 12 episodes. It's nice work if you can get it. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, in a few minutes, I will ask if it's time for the Tory party to forget about Boris Johnson and move on, and whether or not voters can and should, really. But later in the show, I'll also talk about the company with more than 200 high street stores that is now facing a massive boycott over its controversial stance on women's rights. Yet again, a company has committed commercial suicide and sacrificed itself at the altar of wokedom. And you hate to see it anyway. But there's more bad news for Harry and Meghan today. Their £18 million deal with Spotify has been binned after just 12 episodes. Meghan hosted one series where she interviewed celebrities and historians about the history of stereotypes aimed at women. She said that at the time she loved doing the podcast. I'm not surprised at that amount of money, but her hopes of doing more have been dashed, and with it, quite possibly, her brand and Harry's brand. Joining me now is royal commentator Judita Da Silva. Judita, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So, what do you make of the news that Spotify have clearly decided that Meghan Markle is not worth the money?
Oh, gosh, I love the way you don't mince words. I think it's kind of a question of recalibrating business on both sides, because I think with the Harry and Meghan brand after the exodus from Britain, I would say they spread themselves too thin. But I think they were in a situation where they needed to know what was going to stick. But then you have an Oprah interview, you have the Netflix series, you have the biography Spare, and then you had the podcast they were supposed to do. But what it said is that from insiders on the Spotify side, they're saying that in 3 years, they only generated one series. and they expected more for an almost $20 million deal. And Spotify, the business, is also grappling with understanding the podcast space. They've famously had teething problems with big personalities in the podcast space like Joe Budden, Joe Rogan, Jamel Hill, and they ended their deal famously with the Obamas last year because a lot of the content creators want more visibility than an exclusivity to Spotify. And a lot of the Black creators want more financial remuneration when they see people like Joe Rogan get a $200 million deal. But for Meghan and Harry, I think it was a case of entering the podcast space. You have got big contenders and big personalities. If you can't churn out the content, you become a financial liability for the business. And so they amicably severed ties with one another.
It is remarkable. I think that a lot of what you said there is absolutely on the money, really, which is that if you are being paid a heck of a lot of money, I mean, the amount of money, I shudder to think what I would do for $20 million, and most of it will be illegal, I think. But the idea that they couldn't churn out enough content for that amount of money, is it lazy?
No, I think it's just they bit off more than they could chew. But then it's also part of you do have to empathize that they were in a situation, like I've said it so many times, they were not cut out for the kind of fame they have. Because for all of his bluster, Harry was protected by the firm, even though he found it problematic. And now he's beginning to understand that people of that stature of fame, they have to contend with really big things in the real world. And he's learning about that. So they kind of must have been in a situation where they said yes to everything, but you cannot generate that much stuff. Even Michelle and Barack Obama, they've been very careful and gradual with what they do because you need to pace themselves. But that's a former American president. They know about pressure. These are relatively young people with an insane amount of fame that just can't handle it.
Could I politely suggest as well, though, that maybe they've turned toxic? I mean, they've had a series of losses recently with the old low-speed car chase through New York. I don't think the reaction to Prince Harry's book was particularly good at all. I know that the sales figures were good. I think that was more out of, like, a morbid curiosity than anything else, than the content of it. And, you know, you look at the way that the public reaction is today, the South Park episode, I mean, good grief, the kind of international fame that they wanted was not that, was it? And so, really, I mean, are brands going to look at them now and think, do I want to be aligned with you? And also, what do I get out of it? What's the point?
On one side, let's be cynical, we're members of the press. And it's almost like when dealing with Donald Trump, it's kind of toxic, but it makes the 24-hour news cycle. When it comes to Harry and Meghan, they're box office gold when it comes to covering press in a 24-hour news cycle. You may not like them, but they do good business for us in the press. But at the same time, I think also they did not understand the space they were trying to get into. And now that they have new management, which is the smartest thing to do, what you do is put all the cards on the table, see what is viable and see what is sustainable. And then, pick your projects carefully. That way you will make good work. And as far as them being a toxic brand, it's in show, but they're in Hollywood. No publicity is bad publicity. Even if you're toxic, you're going to sell tickets. So I don't think that's a problem in America.
Interesting. I might slightly disagree with that, but we'll see how it pans out. And certainly their accountant isn't disagreeing with you, let's be honest. So, I mean, who am I to say anything about it? Was it a mistake to try to do a podcast that was based around some kind of holier-than-thou, higher echelon of intellect? I have got this message to give across, words of wisdom, when, with respect, Meghan Markle maybe did not have the lived experience or, dare I say it, intellectual wisdom and capacity to actually offer something to people in a way that a lot of other people do, like Jordan Peterson, for example?
I think that it's 100% that when you're getting, like I said, the podcast space, it's sensational and terrifying because there are big personalities, intelligent personalities, seasoned personalities. But I do appreciate the good intention behind what she was trying to do as a woman with a very big platform. I think she was ill-equipped to do it on the level she was because you're competing with the likes of Michelle Obama, who's a slam dunk. But I think you learn hard lessons when you're that famous, and they will do better in the future.
Look, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Judita Da Silva, the royal commentator and friend of the show, friend of the channel. Get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Loads more between now and 5 o'clock. As the dust settles over Partygate, I will ask, is it time for the Tories to move on and forget Boris. Crucially, can Conservative voters? Loads of reaction in the inbox to this. I'll go to that very, very shortly. And some more breaking news about Boris Johnson, by the way, which I will fill you in on. But we will also look at this, frankly, appalling decision to let the monstrous serial killer Levi Belfield get married in prison. I mean, who would want to marry this guy anyway? But it should not be allowed to happen. Right now, though, it's your headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Patrick. The suspect in the Nottingham knife attacks, Valdo Calocane, has been charged with the murders of the 3 people who were killed in the city on Tuesday. The 31-year-old is a former student of Nottingham University. He's accused of killing Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates. He's also accused of 3 counts of attempted murder after 3 people were injured, 1 critically, when they were hit by a van on that morning. He's due to appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. The Advisory Committee on Business Appointments is accusing Boris Johnson of committing a clear breach of the rules. According to the watchdog, the former Prime Minister informed them of his new role as a columnist at the Daily Mail a half hour before the public announcement. His first piece will be out tomorrow and he's promised to offer uncensored views. Well, it comes as the Prime Minister faces a battle to hold his Tory party together after Boris Johnson was found to have lied to MPs over Partygate. A debate and vote on the Privileges Committee report, published yesterday, will take place in the Commons on Monday, with some Tory MPs uncertain about what to do. Mr Johnson, who's branded the report deranged, remains popular with many of his party members, and his most loyal supporters are expected to vote against it. Number 10 hasn't yet said if the Prime Minister will attend that vote. The former Director General of the Police Watchdog has been charged with raping a girl under the age of 16. Michael Lockwood is accused of 6 counts of indecent assault and 3 counts of rape against the teenager. The Crown Prosecution Service says the 64-year-old allegedly committed the crimes during the 1980s. He left the Independent Office for Police Conduct in December after it emerged he was being investigated over a historical allegation. That's the up-to-date, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com. Now, though, back to Patrick.
Yes, OK, so all of the editorial in the national newspapers today was really either we've hired Boris Johnson to work for us or the Tory party need to move on from Boris. And I thought, well, that's fine. Maybe the Conservative Party do need to move on from Boris. But what does moving on from Boris Johnson actually look like? It means all rallying around Rishi Sunak, doesn't it? And that also means, crucially, the public rallying around Rishi Sunak. And we look at the things that he's achieved so far. Not particularly great. His big Stop the Boats campaign, as far as we can tell at the moment, has made things worse, which is not great, is it? And a lot of you have been getting in touch. In light of the fact that Boris Johnson as well, today, I mean, this guy has signed a deal with the Daily Mail and now has apparently been accused of definitely breaking the rules when it comes to informing a parliamentary body about work outside Parliament. I mean, who cares at this point? Who cares? But my point was this. It may well be time for the Tories to move on, but will the British public move on from Boris? And the emails I'm getting in at the moment, Susan, it feels more and more like Boris Johnson is subject to bullying in the workplace. I love that email. Fantastic. You're right on Rishi Sunak not wanting to win the next election. That's from Kay. There's all of this stuff. I will never vote Conservative again. It's non-stop in the inbox at the moment. If we move on from Boris, will we reopen the investigation into the beer and Korma gate involving Keir Starmer? That's from Richard. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who clearly feel as though they will not forgive the ousting of Boris Johnson and quite possibly can't bring themselves to vote for Rishi Sunak, and that's what matters. Well, I am going to go now to our esteemed guest, OK, and it is the one and only David Mad Dog Maddox, who is a fantastic political commentator and indeed the political editor of Express Online. Thank you very much, David. Do you think the public will move on from Boris Johnson? Because they're the voters at the end of the day.
I just don't see how anybody can move on from Boris at the moment, least of all, actually, the Conservative Party. I mean, like you, we've been getting lots of messages from Express readers about this, and actually ordinary members of the Conservative Party, not the MPs, obviously. And, you know, they're livid about it, they're outraged about it, they're convinced that there's been a stitch-up. You know, the lack of big personalities anywhere in Parliament at the moment is, you know, it's left a vacuum, it's left a void. And it's a void that even outside Parliament, I think Boris is going to fill.
But what actually happens? Because the Conservative Party is essentially, in a way that the Chinese Communist Party will be proud of, trying to purge people who dare to say, I owe my job to Boris Johnson, I actually quite like the guy, and I think there's been a witch hunt. Well, you are now being ostracised from within the Conservative Party, and, you know, they can all rally round Rishi as much as they like, but the reality of the situation is the public are going to have to vote at some point, and I'm getting hundreds of emails here saying I will never vote for them again unless Boris is back. So, I mean, realistically, the public aren't ready to move on, are they?
No, they're not. And I don't think a lot of MPs are. They may have been silenced. Some won't be, and we'll find out who won't be on Monday. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Nadine Dorries say a few words, and Priti Patel may be saying a few words. Because they don't care really what Rishi thinks of them. I think the MPs are just in damage limitation mode. They know they're going to get a kicking at the next election. They want to save as many of their seats as possible, and then they want to go on to the next leader whilst Labour runs a country.
What is fascinating is this poll that came out, OK? So it said more than three quarters, actually, of people do think Boris Johnson knowingly misled the Commons. So, OK, fine, that's what 3/4 of people think. I would have loved to have seen a follow-up question, which is, do you actually care? I would also have loved to have seen a follow-up question that was some study around if you are repeatedly told in the media, non-stop, constantly, this man's an absolute liar and a charlatan, this man's an absolute liar and a charlatan, and to be fair, he does have a slightly checkered past, whether or not you've already decided that this guy's a liar, and that influences your view on whether or not he has misled Parliament. I mean, even if the people think he did mislead Parliament, do you think they care?
I don't think they do. I think all the issues around Boris were always baked in on him. People understood what sort of personality he was, what sort of character he was, the fact that he was a bit sketchy with the facts. You know, they liked the bold, big picture man, you know, who kind of fancied himself as a second Churchill. They liked that sort of thing. You know, they don't really kind of identify with technocrats like Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, and, you know, who don't really seem to believe him much. So it's, you know, I don't think they really cared too much about whether he deliberately misled Parliament. Personally, I don't think he did deliberately. He obviously misled Parliament, and he apologised for that and corrected the record. But, you know, it's this goes back to really 2016 referendum and Brexit. You know, ever since the establishment lost that referendum, they've been trying to work out why nobody listened to them and why they lost. And they can only think that the voters were somehow conned from their amazing truth. And they've been trying to portray Boris as this habitual liar to prove that people were lied to and all the rest of it. And that's what this comes down to.
Do people need to wake up a bit, David, and just look at things in the round? The Brexit referendum result was a bloody nose for people who could not fathom the idea that two sides could make an argument and the old lovey lefty side could lose it, because they, of course, have all the intellectual superiority and they know best, which is in some ways exactly why they lost, actually. And though they couldn't get their heads around that, and then, you know, barnstorming Boris Johnson comes in. Oh, people didn't quite like this guy. He said, oh, gosh, he's got a rather fruity personal life. And he to kind of... People seem to love him, even though he went to Eton. And they couldn't understand all of this. He goes down well with Northerners. I've never met a Northerner, but I don't know why they don't like him. And all of this stuff. And then you see now they want to implement a border policy to control our borders. And the Home Office is, in some cases, actually reportedly actively working against that. And then we then get another Prime Minister that wants to slash taxes and go for growth. Oh, we can't have that either. So she gets ousted by a lettuce. And we end up with Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak, and the country's knackered.
Yes, I mean, the Whitehall establishment, it's not only them, though. You know, you could talk about large sections of the media, particularly the BBC, but the Whitehall establishment had a nervous breakdown every time anybody talked about any kind of conservative policies. You know, goodness help us that we actually control our borders, that we stop splashing out money abroad, that we actually kind of focus on our own issues, and we actually deal with the problems which led to the Brexit vote. There's a reason people who had never voted before came out and voted in that referendum, because they wanted change. It was a kind of peaceful revolution, if you like. And that revolution hasn't gone away just because they've currently kind of knocked out Boris. It certainly hasn't gone away.
You know what? So your prediction basically is that it's all very well and good for the Conservative Party to say we need to move on from Boris Johnson, but unfortunately a lot of their voters are not going to do that. I tell you what, the big question will be, which we don't have time to get stuck into now, David, but no doubt we will do at some point in the near future, is where on earth those people go. Because I don't really think that Keir Starmer gets them going and fires them up either. Rishi Sunak, I don't think does. I'm not seeing any evidence of that. So what on earth happens there? But David, always appreciate your time, my good man, and I will see you very soon. David Maddox there, political editor of The Express online. Take it easy. Now, this is a very, very serious story, and one that I find incredibly anger-inducing, especially in the wake of what we discussed yesterday, which was double rapist child murderer Colin Pitchfork being released on parole again after being recalled a few weeks after he was released last time for approaching women. But anyway, serial killer Levi Belfield is going to be allowed to get married in prison. It's an absolute disgrace. I also would seriously like to have a strong word with the individual who is considering marrying him. But I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Channel.
Well, very shortly, I will tell you all about the huge high street company that is now facing a boycott after calling many of its customers bigots. Yeah, I know. Anyway, now, though, to a story that makes me feel physically sick. Serial killer Levi Belfield is to be allowed to get married in prison. Belfield is serving 2 whole life orders for killing 13-year-old Millie Dowler, Marsha McDonnell and Amélie Delagrange. It's reported he's now won a bid to be given £30,000 in legal aid to challenge the initial decision to block his marriage. Let's just get the thoughts now of Simon Harding. He's a former senior investigating officer at the Met Police. What an absolute disgrace and slap in the face this must be to the relatives of the victims.
Yeah, I mean, it is, isn't it? I mean, one of the things of, you know, he's gone through the Human Rights Act. You know, one of the main things for human rights is the right to life, which he's taken away from 3 people. So, you know, the right to get married has been taken away but from those 3 girls. And, you know, he is an extremely violent person. And to think that we have to back down, of course, one of the biggest greats is the legal aid, £30,000 of taxpayers' money to challenge this. And I know loads of police officers that worked on that. I was in homicide in 2008 when he was doing that stuff, and you know, working with those families that they did, and the work those officers put in. You know, there's many retired now who will be sitting here literally spitting at what that information they've just heard.
But he revels in it, Levi Belfield. He revels in it. There's talk about him converting to Islam and then that maybe being of some kind of weird publicity stunt. There's talk about him every 2 minutes he's confessing to another murder that he may or may not have done. And now he's getting married. And, you know, why on earth is this guy even... Frankly, you know, I was going to say allowed to breathe the same oxygen as us, but why is he allowed visitors? Why is he allowed to develop any kind of relationship? Supposedly he got down on one knee in front of a female visitor in front of prison wardens, for goodness sake, at his prison. Shouldn't he just be locked in a cell on his own?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have thoughts about people like that and what should happen to them eventually. But, I mean, the systems and processes and the laws that we have, I mean, they're suggesting they're going to change the law to prevent this. I mean, you know, it's him as a person, and you know, this is another publicity stunt. I mean, you know, what are they going to get out of their marriage for a start? I mean, she's never going to be able to spend time with him. He should never be out of prison. You know, perhaps it's a publicity stunt for her, but you know, that taxpayers' money is one that really eats away at me as well.
Apparently, he's demanding some money for an engagement ring, which is just bonkers as well. I mean, the idea that I would ever have to sit here, I mean, this is bad enough, but I would have to sit here and report on a taxpayer-funded engagement ring for Levi Belfield. I think you hit the nail on the head quite early on in this chat, actually, which is that this guy has taken, in some of the most brutal fashions, by the way, we don't need to go into all the gory details now, the lives of at least 3 young women, one of them just a girl, actually. And he now is using his human right to essentially an enjoyable existence in order to get married. It just doesn't feel right, does it?
No, it doesn't. I don't. You know, it's just so contrary, isn't it, to take people's lives away like that in the fashion that he did, the premeditation. You know, and then officers think there's many more cases which he was involved in where, you know, people got away without very, very serious injury. You know, they were constantly looking at his previous cases that were unsolved. And so, you know, it just seems so easy, doesn't it, to then just turn around and give him what he wants when he's taken away so much from so many people and so many families. And
I don't know if you've ever particularly looked into anyone exactly like Levi Belfield, but, you know, in your capacity as a former senior investigating officer at the Met, people like him you know, is there any hope for him ever recognising the seriousness of his crimes? Is there any hope for any kind of, you know, I don't want to say rehabilitation, but I mean, just describe the mindset of him, if you can, for me, in your view.
Yeah, I mean, I've dealt with a few people like that who've you know, killed, like Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman, Daniel Hussein, who killed the two girls in the park only a few years ago. You know, people like that are set aside from everybody else. They are particularly dangerous, and you know, you personally don't think there is any form of rehabilitation that can change the mindset that they went into those crimes with. He is one of those people. You know, he is incredibly evil, and you know, speaking to officers that worked on that case for many years, you know, they said that is the most evil person they have come across. And you know, to give him these opportunities now, I mean, surely this can go as high as possible to say, you know, stop this. This is ridiculous. You know, he should not be afforded that money, and he should not be afforded these rights that he took away from these girls.
I mean, at the very least, I'm speaking personally, you would like to think that he was kind of suffering inside, but he clearly isn't. I mean, he's getting 3 square meals a day. He's probably got his own cell. He's in there for life now. No one's finished him off yet, and he's allowed to get married, and he can also get legal aid in order to fight his right to get married, which now he will, which I just find absolutely so. Look, thank you very, very much. It was great to chat to you, as always, Simon. I must say, Simon, I do long for the day, one day, when you and I get to have a chat about something a lot less serious and morbid, but you take care. All right, Simon Hardy there, who's a former senior investigating officer at the Met Police. Now, OK, that was very heavy, and this week's news agenda has been quite heavy, OK? So I thought I would just gear change now and lighten it up a bit. Now, if you were watching and listening yesterday, I said something very, very stupid. Here's a reminder. 7.5 grand, OK? If we get to 60 grand by end of play on this show tomorrow, I will wax my chest for when I go on stage for the Dream Boys, and I will film it. And you can, so even if you hate me, which I know that lots of you do, and you think, just give me the money so that you see me undergo extreme physical pain, OK? justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. If you hit 60k by tomorrow at 6 p.m, I'm getting waxed. Right, well, I gave you 26 hours to get to 60 grand, and it took you 15 minutes. So, I mean, thank you. But this is all, of course, for a very, very good cause. I am raising money for the mental health charity Mind, and I'm going to be dancing on stage with the Dream Boys on the 28th of June in Bromley. There's me, strutting my stuff with the Dream Boys. Can I just urge everybody, in case you think that this isn't going to be that humiliating for me or terrible, to just look up the Dream Boys online and have a look at the kind of thing they do and what they look like, and then, you know, look at me and think whether or not I'm going to be able to do that. But yes, next week I am going to spend my own money. My own money? I think I'm spending my own money. OK, spending my own money, basically, for someone to inflict GBH on my body, and I will be getting waxed, OK? I will be getting waxed. Now, there's just 12 days to go until I dance on stage with the Dream Boys, who are the most famous group of male strippers, and I'll be doing 3 routines on the night. One of them will be a solo. I will be getting my chest waxed next week in preparation. You've raised £63,500. Thank you. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys, and it's all for a good cause. It's for the mental health charity Mind. So there we go. Now, though, OK, a reminder of our top story, which I'll be bringing to you very shortly. Police have now charged a man with 3 counts of murder following the attacks in Nottingham on Tuesday. He's also been named. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and it's going to be an action-packed final hour of this show. A couple of the old classics, but a couple of new ones as well, some of which I know are going to wind you right up. Shall we have a look at what I'm going in with, OK? Shockingly, well, it's not really a shock anymore, is it? Rishi Sunak's plans to bring down that asylum seeker backlog have actually made it worse, apparently, and we are massively overpaying to the tune of around £2.2 billion a year. The problem is getting worse and not better. Do you think Rishi Sunak is really behaving like a man who wants to win at the next general election? We've had the old Boris Johnson witch hunt, haven't we? And now there appears to be an inability to get anyone on a plane or to turn a single boat back. That's what I want to know from you today. Do you think that Rishi Sunak is really got any chance at the next general election? We're also going to be talking about this as well. Meghan Markle, she's been dumped, hasn't she? Yes, that's right. Spotify have flushed her podcast down the toilet. And so that is, frankly, quite bad news for Meghan and Harry. Apparently, it was also being given $20 million. $20 million, and one of the main reasons that they got canned in the end was because they weren't producing enough content. I mean, I would actually do anything for $20 million. Anything. I am also, by the way, talking of raising a little bit of money, going to be doing this, OK? So, yes, I am indeed going to get my chest waxed because you lovely lot raised enough money for the mental health charity Mind that I have to do it. We hit 60k yesterday. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. That is the way that you can donate. All of the money goes to the mental health charity Mind. I am on a mission to try to do everything that I possibly can to combat the epidemic of male suicide in this country, because every single day, sadly, 12 men take their own lives. On the 28th of June in Bromley in Kent, I will be stripping on stage with the Dream Boys. And thanks to you lot hitting that financial target of 60 grand yesterday, I now have to get my chest waxed next week. So, yes, if it gets to 80 grand, I'll wax. No, OK, all right. Look, loads more coming your way, including a couple of other stories that I'll tell you about in a second, but they're really going to get you going. Find out why hashtag boycott Wix is now trending. Well, in fact, I'll just give you a little sneaky heads up, a little bit of a clue. If you insult your entire customer base and call them all transphobic bigots, then realistically, your share price is going to tumble and people aren't going to shop in your store. But I'll be telling you more about that in just a second. And as well, deeply distressing story this. A teacher who misgendered a primary school pupil is now facing having to remortgage their own home to cover the legal costs after they lost their job. What is the world coming to? GBViews at gbnews.com. But right now, it is your headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Patrick. The suspect in the Nottingham knife attacks, Valdo Calocane, has been charged with the murder of the 3 people who were killed in the city on Tuesday. The victims were students Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and 65-year-old Ian Coates. 31-year-old Calocane is a former student of Nottingham University. He's also accused of 3 counts of attempted murder after 3 people were injured, 1 critically, when they were hit by a van on that morning. He's due to appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. The Advisory Committee on Business Appointments is accusing Boris Johnson of committing a clear breach of the rules. According to the watchdog, the former Prime Minister informed them of his new role as a columnist at the Daily Mail a half hour before the public announcement was made. His first piece will be out tomorrow and he's promised to offer uncensored views. Well, it comes as the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, faces a battle to hold his Tory party together after Boris Johnson was found to have lied to MPs over Partygate. A debate and vote on the Privileges Committee report, published yesterday, will take place in the Commons on Monday, with some Tory MPs uncertain about what to do. Mr Johnson, who's branded the report deranged, remains popular with many of his party members, and his most loyal supporters are expected to vote against it. Well, Number 10 hasn't yet said if the Prime Minister will attend that vote. But Shadow Women's and Equality Secretary Annalise Dodds says the Prime Minister needs to stand up to Mr Johnson.
I think its findings are damning and they really indicate that Boris Johnson was a lawbreaker, but also that he was a liar, that he misled Parliament. Now it's down to Rishi Sunak to actually show some backbone. You know, he's not shown backbone on this so far. The taxpayers picked up Boris Johnson's legal bill. Rishi Sunak has shown himself to be unwilling to stand up to egos in his party until now. We've got so much psychodrama still in the Conservative Party when it should be focused on delivering the people's priorities.
The former Director General of the Police Watchdog has been charged with raping a girl under the age of 16. Michael Lockwood is accused of 6 counts of indecent assault and 3 counts of rape against the teenager. The Crown Prosecution Service says the 64-year-old allegedly committed the crimes during the 1980s. He's left the Independent Office for Police Conduct in December after it emerged he was being investigated over a historical allegation. Strikes by junior doctors in England continue. If you're watching on television, you can see pictures of people gathered in Westminster this afternoon in support of almost 50,000 members of the British Medical Association who are striking as part of their 72-hour industrial action. The dispute remains deadlocked, with no talks planned in a standoff between the BMA and the government. The strike ends at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. By mutual agreement, Spotify has ended its lucrative deal with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Meghan Markle hosted just 1 podcast series as part of the deal, which ran for 12 episodes. The couple signed the deal with the streaming giant, estimated to be worth around £18 million in late 2020. Well, in a joint statement, the 2 parties said they were proud of the series they made together. A hose pipe and sprinkler ban is to be introduced in Kent and Sussex from the 26th of June as the heatwave continues across the country. South East Water says it's bringing in the ban amid shortages in the two counties, where drinking water has also reached record demand this month. Some households in Kent and Sussex have been without water since Monday due to supply issues. Rule breakers could find themselves hit with a £1,000 fine. Conservative MP Noscani told us there was no option but to impose the ban.
I know everyone doesn't want a hosepipe ban. I wanted it. It's here. It's a really good result. It means that people can have up to 10% more water in their systems at home. But look, really, South East Water need to get their act together. We've had a couple of days of sunshine and people have now not had water for up to 5 days. And people don't even know when it's going to be back.
Former mixed martial arts star Conor McGregor is accused of sexual assault. The incident is alleged to have taken place in a bathroom at a basketball game. That was during the NBA Finals in Miami last week. McGregor's lawyer has labelled the allegations as false and says the ex-UFC champion won't be intimidated. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, back to Patrick.
Well, loads more on the really big, hard-hitting news of the day very shortly. But first, I wanted to bring this story to your attention. Wix is the latest company to slaughter itself at the big woke trans altar after Bud Light and Gillette. How many more brands want to commit commercial suicide? In case you've been wondering why hashtag boycott Wix is trending, then it's because their COO has just scored an own goal that former Premier League footballer Richard Dunn would probably be quite proud of. What a pillock. Fraser Longdon, for absolutely no reason whatsoever, decided it would be a good idea to call, essentially, the majority of his customer base bigots who are unwelcome in the home improvement shop. Wix initially sponsored a float at Brighton Pride last year, which said, no LGB without the T on it. OK. But now he's come out and said that people who think that men aren't women, so gender-critical people, so i.e. people who think that a woman is an adult human female, and, well, yeah, well, they're not welcome, apparently, in Wix. He said, I don't think I'm ever going to change some of the bigots out there's minds. I'm never going to win that argument with them. So we were doing the Pride float to show support to the trans community. He said that most of the population, get this, most of the population is in a sort of slightly ignorant but mostly kind position. Well, another insult there, isn't it, to most of the population. Nice one, Longo. He went on and said, the other 10%, you know, they're just hot air. Oh, go and buy a tin of paint in the nearest place to them. That might have been us before, it might not be us afterwards. And equally, if they do come in and buy a tin of paint and behave that way, they're not welcome in our stores anyway. I would love to know the stats on the amount of people that have been openly transphobic in a Wix, by the way, but there we go. What a total plonker. The share price has predictably plummeted. And as I've said, hashtag boycott Wix has been trending all day. Even if every single trans person in Britain descended onto Wix en masse, it wouldn't be enough to repair the damage of this idiot's comments. It's another example, though, isn't it, in my view, of overpaid executives saying stuff that I'm convinced they don't even really mean because they think it's the right thing to do, and it catastrophically backfiring. Just a quick Google search, by the way, of the kind of things that you can buy at Wix reveals Wix offer an extensive range of nails, screws, sealants and adhesives. Well, good. Fraser Longdon can nip into one of his shops and buy all the materials he needs to piece his career back together. Wix has issued a statement to GB News in which it says, at Wix, we are proud to be an inclusive home improvement employer and support the LGBTQ+ community in its entirety. We are committed to building a workplace and culture where all colleagues can feel at home. Good. Right, OK, get your views coming in on that, gbviews at gbnews.com. But we are returning to that big, serious, very serious story of the day, so a massive gear change here, and it's what's been going on in Nottingham. As we were discussing in the last hour, Police have now charged 31-year-old Valdo Kalakane with the murders of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates in Nottingham. He has also been charged with 3 counts of attempted murder and will appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. Let's go back to GB News' national reporter, Ellie Costello, who is in Nottingham for us as we speak. Ellie, so what is the very latest in this absolutely shocking case?
Good afternoon to you, Patrick. Yes, 2 significant developments in the past hour or so. The first is that after 3.5 days in custody, Valdo Kalakane, who is 31, has been charged now with 3 counts of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder after an alleged knife and van rampage in the city in the early hours of Tuesday morning. Those charges relating to the University of Nottingham students Grace O'Malley Kumar and Barnaby Webber, both 19 years old, who were fatally stabbed in Ickleston Road in the city just after 4 a.m. And then Ian Coates, aged 65, the school caretaker, who was later found fatally stabbed in Magdala Road in the early hours of Tuesday morning. And then those 3 charges of attempted murder relate to 3 members of the public allegedly being struck by a van. We've also had a statement from Nottinghamshire Police, Patrick, I'll share a bit of that with you now, that says that this is a significant development in this case. They've asked people to respect the privacy of the families and allow them to grieve at this really difficult time. They also pled with the public not to speculate about this case online, as it could amount to contempt of court and it could lead to the case being thrown out. So they did have that warning for people, but they did say they were keenly aware of the deep emotion being felt, not just in Nottingham, but across the country at the loss of these 3 lives. And we do know that Valdo Kalakane will appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. And of course, we will have all of that for you on GB News. A second update for you, Patrick, in the last few minutes, and that is an update on Nottinghamshire Police, who referred themselves to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Now, that is because at some part of Tuesday's incident, a marked police van was following the van that Valdo Kalakane was allegedly driving when he allegedly hit those pedestrians during the Nottingham attacks. Now, the IOPC says that marked police car was only in sight of that van for about a minute, and they immediately attended to the pedestrians after they were allegedly struck. So only had sight of that van for about a minute. That's from the IOPC, but they are going to continue to investigate. They've released a statement saying they've spoken to the 2 pedestrians hurt in that van collision to tell them of their decision to investigate the incident further. They will want to find out if the presence of that police car had any impact on the pedestrians later being struck. So we do know that that investigation is going to be taking place with the IOPC. But that's the latest update for you, Patrick. Valdo Kalakane, age 31, has been charged with 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and he will appear in Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow.
Yeah, Ali, thank you very, very much. That's Ellie Costello there, our national reporter from Nottingham, with the very, very latest on that case that gripped Nottingham and the nation as well. And grief, I mean, it's just been such a shocker from start to finish, hasn't it? But yes, that individual who is alleged to have been the attacker will be in a magistrate's court tomorrow. We will be giving you all of the updates on that right here on GB News. But on to other news now. A very major setback to Rishi Sunak's plans to tackle the migrant crisis. Now, a major report says that efforts to clear the asylum backlog aren't working. In fact, they're actually making it worse. So viewers on GB News can now see pictures of more migrants arriving at Dover this morning. The National Audit Office says that by focusing on people who have been waiting for a decision for a long time, it's inadvertently led to a bigger backlog of newer claims. So Rishi Sunak said, I want to clear this backlog. At that time, he said it stood Good England there. It stood at around 79,000 people. In reality, apparently, it was about 100,000 people. So he had to clear that backlog in order for him to hit his target. Well, they're managing to get through a grand total of around 1,100 people a week. In June last year, that was 600 people a week, but they need to be hitting 2,200. The problem for good old Rishi, of course, is that in the meantime, loads of people are still rocking up in Dover, which isn't great, and the government, as well, is spending £2.2 billion more than it thought it would, accommodating these people, and they have to try to find around 500 new accommodation rooms for them every single week. Again, a bit of context. How many people can fit on that barge that's about to rock up? Well, what, 800, is it? So, bingo, in one weekend, that's full. Joining me now to discuss this further is the former Brexit Party MEP. It's Rupert Lowe. Rupert, thank you very much. So, Rishi Sunak is actually, unfortunately, making things worse. And is the reality of it that if he wants to win the next general election, he's got to turn some boats back and get some planes taken off to Rwanda?
Well, I think, Patrick, good to be on your show. Thank you for having me on. The problem, I think, is, as usual with the state, it fails in almost everything it's trying to do at the moment. And my worry is they've now got these targets, which, with the election less than 18 months away, probably October next year, the worry I've got is that the imperative becomes greater and greater just to clear the backlog.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As you say, it's not just the backlog, it's how many people are arriving and how many new claims are actually coming in. And the problem is they'll be throwing more money at more people, more resources, more empire building within the state. And at the end of the day, as we know, the state doesn't deliver. What I'd far rather we had, rather than a sort of panic to try and appease the British people before the election, is to have a proper long-term plan to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And as I've always said, that needs a cool, calm, collected head and some long-term policy and a belief that they are going to achieve what they set out to achieve. And that means a radical change in the way we're dealing with it at the moment. It means turning the border taxi service, as I call it, into a proper border force.
Yeah.
And ensuring that we don't accept any illegal immigration, and I think that they are beginning very slowly to change the law on this. But as we've said, like Australia, every single person who comes here illegally should never be allowed to settle here.
But let me just clarify for some people as well, Rupert, which is that because of these targets that the government has set, they've said we were going to try and find 500 new rooms for these people every single week. I long to live in a country where a government puts as much energy into housing 500 homeless military veterans every single week, or 500 homeless single mothers, or 500 vulnerable, needy people who've paid into the tax system their whole lives, or OAPs, people who are really struggling in their older age. That's the kind of country I want to be living in. Why on earth are people who've come here illegally, some of them will have a criminal record as long as your arm, who've entered this country illegally across the Channel, who are economic migrants, frankly, on the take, some of them? Why on earth is our government scrambling around to go, flipping out, we've got to house these people, this is our top priority, and then on top of that, as you allude to, Rupert, they're just going to wave them all through anyway, aren't they? They're going to wave them all through to try and win the next election.
That's the danger, Patrick. You know, as the election draws near and failure continues, which I've always thought it would, so the necessity to let them in, as you say, in a sort of almost like, you know, a moratorium, an acceptance that we've got it wrong. And, you know, as usual, it'll be the taxpayer, the decent, hard-working taxpayer who pays his taxes, gets hunted down by HMRC.
Yeah.
And as we know, taxes are at their highest level for about 70 years.
Absolutely.
And the state can't administer everything. I mean, I've been saying this for 3 or 4 years now, because if you try and do anything, the state has basically made it absolutely essential that you do things through them. They've regulated, they've created laws, they've licensed. And at the end of the day, they can't run, they can't run anything except chuck money at it and waste taxpayers' money. Look at PPE procurement. Look at almost every aspect of what the state does.
I could just about tolerate, Rupert, I could just about tolerate having an infinite number of rules and regs in my life if I was parting with a huge amount of my salary and everyone's salary, everyone's doing the same thing, parting with a huge amount of your money that you earn every single month, if you thought that was going anywhere half decent. But then you look at it's coming going to people coming across the channel, it's just being, you know, I nearly said a swear word then, it's being pumped into the NHS at a rate of knots, right? And you think...
It's hard not to swear, Patrick, I agree with you.
It is hard not to swear, but, you know, and you think, where's my tax money going? Where's my tax money going? And I don't feel any safer and I don't feel any better served. And like you said there, we're probably going to wave a lot of these people through. Look, Rupert, thank you very much. I better cut you off before we drag each other down a path we don't want to go to, but it's always a pleasure. Rupert Lowe there, as former Brexit Party MEP. You get your views coming in, GB Views at GBNews.com. But yeah, look, that is the reality of the situation that's taking place at the moment. And I can't believe that if Rishi Sunak wants to win the next election, especially in light of what's going on with Boris Johnson at the moment, the people, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of people who back Boris maybe would consider voting for the Conservative Party once more if they thought there was something being done in the channel, which unfortunately there isn't really, but there we go. More on this on our website though, gbnews.com. It's the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got the best analysis and opinion, as well as all of the latest breaking news. Now, so, some different stories for you now. A council sacked a teacher after she raised safeguarding concerns about an 8-year-old girl who identified as a boy. Now her house is at risk as the council is demanding she pays legal costs, which stand at 14 grand. The world is going absolutely mad. Misgendering an 8-year-old and you lose your house. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In just a few minutes, I have got a very special guest, a familiar face. She's travelled a long way to be here, who's going to be talking about another setback for Harry and Meghan. So make sure you stay tuned for that and find out why I made a very painful mistake yesterday. But now, on to a story of this primary school teacher who was sacked for raising concerns about an 8-year-old girl who identified as a boy, or at least said she did. The teacher faces having to remortgage her house as Nottinghamshire County Council demands that she pays her £14,000 of legal costs after she accused them of unfair dismissal. She was concerned about the welfare of the child after the school instructed all staff to refer to them with male pronouns, refer to her with male pronouns and a male name. And the child was told to use the boys' toilets and dressing rooms, right? Joining us now to discuss this is Tim Dieppe from Christian Concern. Tim, thank you very much. So, we live in a country now where if you misgender an 8-year-old, they take your house off you.
Well, it does seem like that, doesn't it? I mean, it is incredible. I mean, what this teacher did is, you know, she was told, along with other teachers, this 8-year-old girl, you now have to call her him. You know, she's now becoming a boy. And this teacher, who has to now anonymise herself, so her name, her pseudonym for this purpose is Hannah, because you know, she can't risk identification and so on. Hannah then raised safeguarding concerns and said, well, what's your medical evidence to do this then? What evidence do you have this is the right thing for this child to allow them to socially transition gender like this? And said herself that she wouldn't go along with it because she didn't think it was the best thing for the school or for the pupil to do, and said that this isn't what they should do, and produced lots of evidence from top medical authorities to show that this is not helpful for children to affirm them in a transgender identity. And what did the school do? Well, the school, disciplined her, ended up dismissing her, didn't listen to her concerns, and pursued, when she tried to pursue her safeguarding concerns in the court, they dismissed it, she lost the case, and now they are pursuing her for the money, and they're saying, OK, well, you haven't got any cash spare, but you could still remortgage your house, so why don't you go and do that then? And
Tim,
this is in spite of the fact that there's an outstanding employment tribunal claim out against the school for unfair dismissal because she was whistleblowing, right? She should have whistleblower protection because she was whistleblowing the school for allowing this girl, 8-year-old, to transition with no evidence why they should do it.
I call them the trans mafia because this is what happens. This is what happens, right? You express an idea like, I think that that little girl is a little girl. And that's my belief, and that's based around predominantly scientific and medical fact. And then they want you to lose your job, and they want to bankrupt you. And let's be honest, the reason why she's hiding her identity is quite possibly so she doesn't get attacked in the street. It's gone a bit far, hasn't it?
Well, and it's worse than that, Patrick, because they also reported to the Information Commissioner for a criminal offence. The Information Commissioner cleared her of any offence. They also reported her to the DBS, the Disclosure and Barring Service, saying she's putting children at risk or whatever, should be banned from teaching for that. The DBS service said, no, they've not going to impose a ban. Then she's been reported to the Teaching Regulation Authority to ask them to ban her from teaching ever again. And consequently, she's not able to work in teaching anywhere at the moment.
Has anyone asked, Tim, has anyone asked, was she a good teacher?
Yes, she was there for about 9 years, and there were no complaints about her teaching, right? So this is the first thing that anybody ever objected to with her, that she raised concerns on behalf of the child, right? She was trying to protect the child, right? And she's the one who's being disciplined, punished, pursued, threatened. You should sell your house. I mean, it really is absolutely extraordinary and shocking what they're doing to her. The intimidation is absolutely massive. She still has an outstanding employment tribunal claim, as I said, and that no way should they be pursuing costs ahead of that at this point.
But you know, this is how they buy silence, right? This is why so many people who, you know, who don't have to get involved in the kind of conversation that we're having right now just swerve it altogether. And that means that a load of people think that they're completely complicit with this bonkers stuff that's going on. It's only when it affects their lives that they think, oh, you know, maybe I wish I'd spoken up a bit earlier. But, Tim, the fact is, people look at stories like this and they think, you know what, I am actually deeply concerned about my little girl or little boy, but I won't raise it because if I do, they will ruin me professionally and personally and financially. And I'm sorry, but that is nuts.
Well, and it is nuts, and it's really incredible intimidation. And I think what we need now is more teachers and more parents to speak up and say, no, we're not taking this. No, we're not tolerating it. Because there's a very aggressive trans lobby, trans activists here who will not tolerate any dissent. In spite of the fact that there are many people raising concerns about this, the government has promised its own new guidance because of so many concerns being raised about what's happening in schools. Should you really be allowing 8-year-old children, or younger sometimes, to just cross-dress and socially transition when there's no medical evidence supporting it, nothing other than the child or the parent saying, I want this now to be a boy, I want this now to be a girl? Surely you should not do that. Surely that is not good for the children. All the medical evidence shows that it is not good. And why are we allowing it? And surely historians will look back and say, why did the whole society go along with something as crazy as that?
You know, one thing, I appreciate that you're from Christian Concern, Tim. I did have a fascinating discussion last week or the week before about what happens when the trans lobby meets certain members of certain other religions, and I expect that might kick right off. But Tim, thank you very much. We'll have to leave it there. Tim Diab from Christian Concern. Just discussing this ridiculous story, really, that this teacher, primary school teacher, sacked and possibly going to have to sell her house to pay legal fees for misgendering an 8-year-old. Anyway, right, Meghan Markle has been dumped. No, not by Harry, but by a company that was going to pay the couple £18 million. I have got a very special guest, hot-footing it into the studio shortly, and with just 12 days to go until I get my kit off on stage with a load of male strippers, find out why I am putting myself through the pain barrier to make sure that I'm looking my best on the big night. I don't write that, don't worry. Now it's the headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Patrick. A man has been charged with the murders of 3 people in Nottingham's knife attacks on Tuesday. 31-year-old Valdo Kalakani, a former student of Nottingham University, is accused of killing Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates. He's also accused of 3 counts of attempted murder after 3 people were injured when they were hit by a van that morning. He's due to appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. The Advisory Committee on Business Appointments is accusing Boris Johnson of committing a clear breach of the rules. According to the watchdog, the former Prime Minister informed them of his new role as a columnist at the Daily Mail a half-hour before the public announcement. His first piece will be out tomorrow, and he's promised to offer uncensored views. Well, it comes as the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak faces a battle to hold his Tory party together after Boris Johnson was found to have lied to MPs over Partygate. A debate and vote on the Privileges Committee report, published yesterday, will take place in the Commons on Monday, with some Tory MPs uncertain about what to do. Mr Johnson, who's branded the report deranged, remains popular with many of his party members, and his most loyal supporters are expected to vote against it. Number 10 hasn't yet said if the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, will attend that vote. The former Director General of the Police Watchdog has been charged with raping a girl under the age of 16. Michael Lockwood is accused of 6 counts of indecent assault and 3 counts of rape against the teenager. The Crown Prosecution Service says the 64-year-old allegedly committed the crimes during the 1980s. He left the Independent Office for Police Conduct in December after it emerged he was being investigated over a historical allegation. That's you up to date, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
All right, let's take a quick look at today's markets. The pound will buy $1.2817 and €1.1732. The price of gold, that's sitting at £1,525.72 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed the day at 7,642 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Well, it's more bad news for Harry and Meghan today, isn't it? And I think we all agree you just hate to see it. Their £18 million deal with Spotify has been binned after just 12 episodes. Meghan hosted one series where she interviewed celebrities and historians about the history of stereotypes aimed at women, allegedly. Here's a flavour of the content that Meghan provided.
In other words, I think what Robin's getting at, and what these people are implying when they use that very charged word, is that this woman, oh, she's difficult. Which is really just a euphemism, or probably not even a euphemism. It's really a code word for the B word.
Have a day off. I mean, anyway, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio now by the one and only Kinsey Schofield, an absolute legend. Kinsey, how are you?
I'm great. I mean, we haven't even discussed the fact that archetype is not the same as stereotype. Why wouldn't you name your podcast Stereotype?
That's true. I mean, so the name was off. But we're in a situation now where Meghan Markle has been binned by mutual consent. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
a big wink. That's a big wink.
What do you think the damage of this will be to her and to Harry?
I do think that this is not the first time that we've seen Harry and Meghan say that they left on their own terms or this was a mutual agreement. And brands and individuals are going to start, you know, cautiously wanting to avoid working with them. I think that this is proof that they are challenging. You saw the BBC come out with that report saying that they would have never shown that Netflix documentary because it was so, the editorial-wise was controlled by Harry and Meghan. They're controlling, they're challenging to work with, and that's why they only produced 12 episodes in 3 years.
They have, essentially. They can try and dress this up any way they want, but it's laziness, isn't it? I mean, if you're paid... I've said this before, I don't mind saying it again, I will do anything for $20 million. Anything. And the idea that I couldn't have produced another 8 podcasts for that amount of money is ridiculous.
Well, and they did remember the original arrangement was that Harry and Meghan were going to be podcasting for Spotify. We got one episode. It was a Christmas special with Tyler Perry and Elton John. Nothing I, associate more with
the same two friends every time.
The birth of Jesus Christ than Tyler Perry and Elton John. And you're right, the same two friends. And so that was the only thing they produced for a while. Then Meghan was going to be solo. This was going to be Meghan rebranding herself. And then she only produced 12 episodes. It was supposed to be about normal people changing the world, and we got Paris Hilton.
You got Paris Hilton.
We got Serena Williams.
Yeah.
These were not normal people changing the world.
Mariah Carey.
We love a good diva.
Yeah, well, exactly, and this was great as well, because, again, it just proved that there's something really going on with Meghan, because Mariah Carey called Meghan a diva. Meghan hated that and released a statement like, oh, my gosh, I didn't realise it. What did she actually mean?
Triggered.
Yeah, triggered. Well, maybe she called you a diva because you have behaved non-stop like a diva. From the old Meghan gets what Meghan wants. I don't like the way this cathedral smells at my multi-million-pound taxpayer-funded wedding. I mean, she is a diva, isn't she?
I think she's a diva. I think that they're challenging to work with. They have not produced the Heart of a Victus documentary for Netflix yet. Where is that? That is still pending. And I just don't think that they're capable of executing. They're so busy and full of vengeance that I think they're distracted with actually executing their work.
Is their brand finished? They've had loss after loss after loss. There was the slow-speed car chase through New York, the Fast and the Spurious, not the Fast and the Furious. Thank you, I'll keep dining out on that. There was also, of course, Harry's book. There's been at least one courtroom loss for Harry. We potentially await another one. We'll have to wait and see on all of that. Is this just it for them? Has the tide turned?
I think that today's a really bad day for Meghan Markle. She hates failing, and she's failing on a global scale. This is a huge audience that are watching, you know, Pearl get canceled by Netflix before it even came to fruition. The Spotify, you know, kicking her to the curb in front of the entire world. This is a hard time for them, and I think that they are really struggling to figure out their identity and what their next steps are. And wait, really quickly, I think it's being an influencer. I think she's going to have to resort to creating digital content, because what else is left?
She's not
going
to do a Gwyneth Paltrow and make candles out of her what's-its, is she?
You know, I wouldn't count it out.
Great. I mean, good gosh, that is a slump, though, isn't it? But isn't this the problem about branding? So if she hadn't tried to brand herself as some kind of ethereal intellectual being who had managed to access a higher echelon of, you know, intellect, then actually maybe she could have just gone and had a chat. But by trying to make every single conversation she has really meaningful,
talking down to you,
I'm passing this information on to you, and you're welcome. And actually people go, I think you might be a bit thick.
Yeah, you haven't taken phone calls from your dad. He's had like 6 strokes in the last 3 years. You know, Meghan preaches about feminism, and the only reason she's been given that platform is because she married a prince.
Yeah.
I mean, the irony behind that. And I think that people are kind of looking at them going, God, you guys are so shallow and vacant.
And I suppose being an influencer is potentially what lies ahead. Do you think that once they maybe realise that they're not particularly well liked in Britain, that their brand as a couple doesn't appear to be working anymore, do you think they will stay together as a couple?
I mean, I do believe that the stress within their professional life does create chaos at home because they don't know where to go. And these are two people that are so controlling, insist that they know their next move and the right move, but they're making all the wrong moves, Patrick. You know, common sense says don't release a press release 12 hours later saying that there was a near catastrophic car chase if you're looking for privacy and you don't want this kind of negative attention. So I think that they need people in their lives that start to tell them, no, this isn't a good idea. They desperately need that.
And what is the reaction like in America at the moment to them? I mean, has the American public turned against them as well? Because, I mean, heaven forbid, but they might have to go back to Canada.
You know, I'm in Los Angeles, and it's widely known that celebrities distance themselves from Harry and Meghan because they're drama and they don't want the association. Press, you know, PR people say, you know, we're not going to invite them to our red carpet because all eyes will be on them and they'll take away from our client. So I do think that people are shunning them, specifically in Hollywood, which is where they need to grow.
She claims that she didn't know what it was like to be treated like a black woman until she was with Prince Harry, and that the idea that being ambitious can be a bad thing is also essentially because she's black, and that's a problem. She didn't realise that since she met Harry either, supposedly. Do you think she hides behind racism, or actually can she not deal with the fact that people don't care what colour she is, they just don't really like her?
Yeah, I do think that you're absolutely correct. Meghan was a household name before she met Prince Harry. She was able to control her brand. She could send her bio and nobody would question it because who the heck was she? But now she's so big, people ask legitimate questions and she can't control the narrative anymore. And I think it drives her crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Kinsey, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure. You've travelled a long way to be here.
Just to be on Patrick's show.
Just to be on my show. Just on my show. No other news shows at all. Look, Kinsey, thank you. Take care. Kinsey's Schofield there, all the way from Los Angeles. Great stuff. Right, OK, so there is just 12 days to go until I get my kit off on stage with a group of male strippers. And if that's not painful enough, I'm going to have my chest waxed next week because you lovely people donated enough money, so much money that I hit the target and now I'm legally bound to do it. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, happy Friday. Now, I just thought I would bring you a couple of stories that you might have missed to round off what has been, well, a bit of a rollercoaster of a week, actually, given this week's news agenda. But I have already talked about the huge asylum backlog. Fine. But if you're one of the 15 million people who want to leave the country and travel from the UK to Spain every year, and that's sinking, by the way, 15 million Brits go to Spain every year. Anyway, well, you might be in for a shock, because officials there are carrying out spot checks to find out whether British tourists can afford their holiday. According to authorities in Madrid, people need to show they've got 93 quid a day. They also have to prove that they've booked a flight out of Spain and that they've sorted out accommodation with on-the-spot checks. So look at what's going on at the moment in Calais, where we've got a load of people who potentially have a criminal record as long as your arm, desperately trying to get over here. We won't check you. We'll put you up in a 4-star hotel. We'll do all of this stuff. And then in Spain, if you are just a Brit walking along the street, you know, with a glass of sangria and like an England football shirt on and a bulldog tattoo on your arm, you get lifted by the Guardia de Seville or whatever they're called, and they demand to look at your bank account to see if you can afford your package holiday. It's shocking, isn't it? Anyway, there you go. That's Spain, though, I suppose. But there we go. So there'll be on-the-spot fines, and that is according to the authorities in Spain. So make sure, if you're going to Spain, OK, that you have got 93 quid a day saving money in your bank account. Otherwise, they'll biff you. So there we go. Anyway, if you were watching this time yesterday, I said something very, very stupid. Here is a little reminder of it. It's all for a good cause. Remember, it's all for charity. 7.5 grand, OK? If we get to 60 grand by end of play on this show tomorrow, I will wax my chest for when I go on stage for the Dream Boys, and I will film it. And you can... So even if you hate me, which I know that lots of you do, and you think, just give me the money so that you see me undergo extreme physical pain, OK? justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. If you hit 60k by tomorrow at 6 p.m, I'm getting waxed. Yes, so I gave you 26 hours to raise the fund in the kitty to £60,000, and it took you 15 minutes. In fact, we then proceeded to raise a lot more than that afterwards, and you lot really want me to get my chest waxed. You'll be pleased to know I have booked in my chest wax for the Dream Boys, and it will be taking place next Friday, which gives me 5 days for the catastrophic rash that it will give me to wear off before I actually have to get my kit off on stage. That's what I'm worried about. Because I've never had my chest waxed before, and will I not get a massive rash and then I will look like I've got chest acne on stage? I don't know. Anyway, but yes, next week I am going to spend my own money getting a chest wax. So there is just 12 days to go until I dance on stage with the Dream Boys, and they are the most famous group of male strippers in the UK. That's me doing my rehearsal. I have got another rehearsal with them the day before. So I'm going to be doing 3 routines on the night. One of them is a solo. I met the lads a few weeks ago. I've learnt the moves. I'm going to be in Bromley in Kent on Wednesday, June the 28th. It's sold out, which means there's going to be more than 1,000 people there. And this is some of the people that I'm going to be performing with on the night. Look at them. Just look at how magnificent they are. Yeah, OK? Fine. Now, if you come back to me... Have you ever seen someone punch a soufflé? Yeah, no. That's this. So it's not going to be great, but I'm doing it for a good cause. I want to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. We've raised nearly 64 grand, justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Thank you to everyone who has donated. But Jubes is here for Jubes & Co.
I was thinking about your chest last night.
Thank you very much.
You told me that Polly had got the job of waxing it.
She can if she wants.
And I thought to myself, we don't know how big a job this is.
It's a big job.
Some young people, you're quite a young chap, they only have a random hair
Greek.
here and there.
I'm half Greek.
So is there a big kind of thatch going on? Because that's what the viewers need to understand. How much of a challenge is that wax?
All of my Greek Cypriot heritage is located on my chest.
It's all shoulder down.
Yeah, it is.
It? Oh, right. Well, that's what I was wondering. I couldn't sleep for thinking about it, actually. I was trying to work out, shall I donate to the waxing fund or not?
OK.
Anyway...
Well, quickly, what you got?
Oh, yeah, I've got the detective that caught Levi Belfield. We need to be thanking him, that's for sure. I'll be talking to him about this whole marriage situation. Yeah. Weird, if you ask me, and unacceptable too. Of course, I want us to talk about climate as well, and loads of other stuff. You'll have to stay tuned for Friday favourites as well, joining me.
You'll have to stay tuned. Jubes & Co. up next. See you next week.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your evening weather forecast for GB News provided by the Met Office. Whilst high pressure has been with us throughout the past few days, it's low pressure that is increasingly becoming in charge as we head into the weekend. It's coming out in the Atlantic, it's steadily progressing in from the west and will be staying with us throughout the weekend and into next week as well. It's already fringing into parts of the west and bringing in these showers that will start to feed their way in throughout the rest of this evening and overnight. Could see some heavy rain in there, particularly for Northern Ireland through the early hours of Saturday morning, quite persistent rain. Generally further east, though, it will stay drier and clearer, and underneath those clearer skies, temperatures dropping down into 10-11 degrees Celsius, so a bit more comfortable for sleeping here, but further towards the west, around 15-16 degrees Celsius, so still quite muggy out there first thing on Saturday. Those showers then continuing to push their way north and westward, so a sprinkling perhaps for parts of northwest England, western Scotland, and we might see the odd one push across southern areas of England as well. Generally, eastern areas tending to stay drier, and again, we'll see a bit of wispy cloud push its way through, and with that cloud, temperatures perhaps a little lower compared to recent days, but still feeling very warm, highs of 24, 25 degrees Celsius. Into Saturday night, again, continuing to see those showers, particularly across western areas, so western Scotland, northwest England, parts of Northern Ireland, still seeing a few filtering through. As we head into the daytime, though, those showers will be turning more widespread, and there is a thunderstorm warning in force for parts of England and Wales throughout the day. These thunderstorms are going to be hit and miss, though. Not everywhere is going to see one, but where you do see them, they are going to be potentially bringing heavy downpours of rain, hail and even some lightning as well. This area of low pressure is staying with us then as we head into Monday and Tuesday. Further thunderstorms and heavy showers are likely throughout those days as well. So do keep up to date with the forecast because it is quite a showery picture on the cards. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here